Hey guys, tonight you step beyond the last friendly flicker of the hearth and feel the dark cup your cheeks like cool river water. The village glow collapses. The path downshifts from line to rumour. Your breath becomes the only metronome you trust. There's no map in your pocket, no compass needle to soothe you, and no calm, robotic voice promising to recalculate. Quick reality check, you probably won't survive this if you treat the night like an app you can swipe away. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the little constellation of places you all call home. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tilt your chin and let your pupils bloom. Color fades. Shape steps forward. Cones clock out. Rods clock in the night shift with thermoses and quiet competence. Edges don't arrive as crisp lines, but as gradients. A paler ribbon where feet pressed grass flat. A darker smear of damp loam. The quick wet shine of slick stone. Instead of looking for a path, you feel for continuity. Your toes become scouts, sending back reports on microslopes. Your ankles become translators, converting texture and tilt into tiny, trustworthy whispers the brain understands without paperwork. Listen. The night is layered, not empty. Ahead, a creek braids sounds glassy, riffle, hollow glug. When a bubble slips free, the steady drum of current shouldering a fallen log. To your left, open ground sharpens the cricket chorus. To your right, shrubs blur it into a soft hiss. Without naming any math, you triangulate. Your shin kisses a twig, and the snap is bright and brittle. This patch sees long afternoon sun. Note taken. Keep moving. Your skin is a compass too. A cool spill brushes your calves. There's a hollow downslope. A warmer exhale lifts from a rock face, late sun stored in stone. The breeze carries the faint metal sweet of wet earth and a thin thread of smoke. Humans. You breathe deeper and match steps. To breath 4 in 4 out like soldiers millennia later. Pacing turns distance into something you can fold in your head. 5 breaths to the bend, 20 to the ford. Light joke 1, no smartwatch needed. Your watch is called lungs. Battery life is exceptional. A mainstream anchor while we walk, upper Paleolithic artists explored deep caves such as Lascaux, around 17,000 years ago, carrying small stone or shell lamps fueled with animal fat to push light hundreds of meters into the hill. Archaeologists have found lamp soot on ceilings and human footprints in far chambers of several caves, evidence that people ventured well beyond daylight and came back again and again. Your lineage didn't merely endure the dark, it learned to work inside it. Quirky tidbit for the road expert trackers, sometimes taste dirt. A pinch to the tongue tells clay from ash, fresh silt from old dust. In wild country, that mineral tang can confirm whether a channel recently ran or whether a herd's commute dusted this stretch of path. Light joke 2, congratulations, you've unlocked sommelier of soil. It pairs best with nothing at all. You practice the most underrated skill, stopping. Stillness widens hearing and smooths those tiny balance corrections so the landscape can update you instead of you forcing a plan onto it. In stillness, the creek's direction clarifies the owl's call thunks from one particular grove, and a distant thud repeats hoof or branch. Historians still argue whether Neanderthals and early modern humans used the same cocktail of spatial memory inference and social signaling, or whether different ecologies nudged them toward different mixes. Either way, the ingredients, sense-tuned attention, paced patience, kept taste familiar. Bring your attention to the edges. Peripheral vision is your motion detector. It catches a fox's low glide, a bat's quick flick, the faint shimmer that betrays water through trunks. Your head begins to drift in a slow S, not as a technique, so much as what a calmer nervous system does on its own. Your feet choose the lines animals use, micro-terraces, where hoof and pad war a level. A narrow, tempting cut in brush that whispers this way costs less. The breeze goes marshy, heavy air, sweet rot. You're not thinking east or west, You're thinking upstream, downstream, upslope, downslope, open, closed, dry, wet. That small vocabulary is enough to keep you oriented. You wet a fingertip and raise it to the ancient weather app. Wind from the left, a touch cooler, probably descending from higher ground. Light joke 3, if your fingertip freezes. Congratulations, you've successfully discovered winter. Fire has tells. A tended camp flame pulses rise, breathe, subside like someone's chest. A lightning-struck snag hisses with no rhythm and throws a harsher light. That smoke thread fattens and reshapes on your tongue. Wood first, then the savory ghost of marrow. People nearby. Meanwhile, your mind has been stacking fragments into a cairn of recognition. The valley's double bend around black basalt, the forked spruce that looks like antlers snagged in the sky, the patch where brittle twigs once warned of savage sun, and now don't. Quick science alley, gentle and short. Some researchers test whether humans possess a weak magnetic sense, perhaps influenced by tiny magnetite grains in tissues. Results are mixed and stubbornly hard to replicate, interesting, not decisive. What you can bank on is less flashy and absolutely real, your vestibular system. Fluid in curled inner ear canals whispers whether you're tilting, turning, or stopping, and over minutes your brain integrates that into a quiet sense of how far, which way. You carry more gyroscopes than your average drone. They just hum instead of beep. You add a trick nearly every forager group rediscovers talking to yourself. Not theatrical narration, just low labels that clip to features long bend snag, shallow ford boulder like a sleeping bison. Repeat until the list condenses into a chant. That chant is a breadcrumb you can hum backward if fog ambushes you, or if panic tries to sprint you into trouble. Fear loves speed, orientation loves rhythm. The canopy thins, a dusting of cold starlight lifts the path. You don't need constellation names yet, you simply ride the brightness across an opening and slip back into shadow. A nightjar churs from a stump. When your soles find clean sandstone, the insect noise gutters like someone turning a dial. In that moment of hush, you hear water tapping rock and angle toward it without thinking in cardinal directions at all. Pause and lay your palm on a boulder. Stone keeps the day's shape. Faces that still hold warmth met the afternoon. Cold faces met morning. Check a few, not one, and you have a crude compass that works even when clouds swallow the moon. You smirk at how fancy tools are. Concentrated habits, a magnetic needle is someone else's distilled patience, and tonight you're distilling your own. The ground swells. Calves complain in that helpful, informative way, up, but not steep. Breath stays even. Step by step, the valley loosens into sequence. This shoulder that saddled the shy gully that appears only when you're exactly here. The world stops being blank and becomes a story with beats and callbacks. Remember the smoke stronger. Remember the brittle twigs gone. You've slipped into shade-long country. You're reading fluently with the full-body eyes for gradients, ears for distance, skin for temperature, nose for trace and time. By the time the first ember glow winks between trunks, you're not finding your way so much as letting your way find you. Senses cooperate. The land becomes legible. No signs, no arrows. Just the old conversation resumed quiet, precise, and oddly kind. In its honesty. Dawn rinses the world in a thin wash of pewter, and the ground finally reads itself to you. Last night, your ears and skin did the heavy lifting. Now your eyes clock in. Lower your gaze until the earth is not down there, but right here, a paragraph under your feet. Soften your focus and let pattern, not single clues, rise. You don't hunt for footprints. You hunt for contradictions bent where other stems stand dull, where other leaves shine. Start with pressure signs, the alphabet of slight wrongness. A blade of grass angled its base, scuffed, pale. A pebble tipped from its cradle, leaving a crescent of raw grit. Mud hardened into a shallow saucer with a feathered rim where a heel skated. You're not counting toes yet. You're counting physics. Weight arrives, pivots, departs. The ground is an impressionable witness, eager, gossipy, and absolutely literal. Crouch and let your palm hover. Warmth in clay means recent. A cool settle means hours. Confirm with your sommelier of soil trick from last night, a pinch to the tongue, a quick yes-no on moisture and silt. Light joke 1 5 stars, earthy bouquet pairs beautifully with more walking. Blow gently across dust and watch micro-shadows bloom along compressed edges. Wind is the oldest magnifying glass. Mainstream fact for your toolkit, the Laetoli footprints in Tanzania, set in volcanic ash about 3.6 million years ago, preserve hominin walkers with a surprisingly modern heel-to-toe gait. Researchers teased stride length and pace from shallow depressions. If science can read steps from deep time, you can read this morning's sand. Now the micro-slopes start speaking. Your ankles report a faint dish where many feet chose the easy line, a terrace 2 fingers lower than the flanking grass. Follow the drift, and the trail becomes a braided stream. Here children cut corners, here elders hugged firmer ground, here hunters stepped wide to avoid noise. Historians still argue whether foraging bans standardized lanes by habit, or whether that neatness only appears near camp. Either way, your feet recognize the savings. Enter a patch of sedge. The blades look bruised, darker, wetter with that cucumber scent when you roll them between fingers. Aroma means fresh passage. Squint at the lay of fibers. They're swept northwest. Stand the same way, and your body understands wind plus herd. Light joke 2 congratulations. You're conversational in sedge level 1. Fluency exam later. Bring snacks. Negative space helps. In dry country, dew beads on untouched growth and disappears along footpaths. Squint toward the sun to catch the sparkle, a constellation here, a dark lane there. Step into the darkness, your lane, and the grass wets your shins, then not at all as the track threads scrub. By noon, this dew letter vanishes like breath on glass. Quirky tidbit, some beaches squeak. Put an ear close and shuffle your fingers. Quartz-rich sand sings at a faint, uncanny pitch when disturbed. Not a compass, but a decent tell for how quiet a campsite will be if kids play near the sleeping aunties. Consider it the shore's customer service voice. A muddy margin where the creek swelled last night and fell back gives confident edges. Deer slots sharp as punctuation, a boar's rounded stamp, the V of a heron that dragged a toe and then launched. Your people's signs slide among them. Narrow heels, a toddler's double-depth stutter where a hand gripped a shoulder. You read the crossing pause test commit splash, playful stamp. Light joke 3, the toddler's contribution is officially labeled Advanced Hydrology. Direction lives in more than toes. Brush drag lines point the way. Arcs of thrown droplets lean downstream. Grit sprayed on the upstream faces of stones tells you who fought current and who surrendered to it. Gather 5 small votes instead of 1 big witness, and the consensus is reliable. When votes disagree, don't argue. Loop. A slow, deliberate circle outward from the last clear sign is how grown-ups find trails without drama. Calibrate the clock. The sun's a hand above the ridge, shadows still long enough to texture the ground. Test plant rebound, bend a stem gently, and watch how fast it straightens. Compare to bent stems in the trail. Fast rebound points to minutes. Lazy rebound says an hour or more. The path widens into a sandy apron near an outcrop nature's whiteboard. Sketch an invisible map under your breath ridge notch stream crossing. Sedge fan sandy apron. That list becomes a melody you can hum backward if fog ambushes you or if heat makes tempers sprout. Notice where people erased their marks, a swept patch under a lean-to, a scuffed-out fire ring, twigs dragged backward over a path to smooth the line. Erasure is its own signature. It announces risk management game animals, rival foragers, or just a tidy elder who hates messy camps. Don't assume motives, read patterns, then move politely. The ridge ahead scrubs the slate clean. Breathe 4 in 4 out, keep last night's rhythm, and look for exit signs. Where does the earth begin writing again? Often it's on the lee 10 paces down where wind's pen runs out of ink. There you rediscover the chain leaf overturned root, polished a bead of grit where a toe clawed on a steep step. Confidence doesn't come from certainty. It comes from patient checking. Myth-busting snack moss does not only grow on the north side of trees, it grows where moisture lingers north in some places, east in others everywhere, because it rained all week in still more. By mid-morning, the text underfoot has taught you its basic grammar. You anticipate where prints will be shallow, wind-swept rock, and where they'll be archived like library books, fine dust tucked under a lip of stone. You make fewer dramatic mistakes because you make more small corrections. Reading the ground isn't heroics. It's steady attention to boring things until they turn luminous. One open debate to tuck in your pack. Some researchers argue humans carry a robust internal path integration ability. Dead reckoning that quietly updates as you move, while others counter that without frequent landmark checks. Our mental map drifts like a raft in fog. The ground suggests a middle path. Your body offers a sketch. The earth supplies the edits. Between the two lost stops being a fate, and becomes a moment you can fix. Step from the sandy apron to firmer duff eyes, soft ears, open, breath, unhurried. The trail that felt like a mystery at sunrise now feels like a conversation you've been having for years. You glance back once. Your prints are barely there. Good. You're learning to travel as if you belong, because here you do. You start stitching the world together, not with thread, but with attention. Yesterday's dew lanes and pressure signs told you where people moved. Today you crown the route with anchors that won't blow away at noon. A boulder like a sleeping bison. A spruce split like a forked tongue. A cliff notch that bites a rectangle out of the horizon. You don't memorize east or west. You memorize keep the antler tree on your left shoulder until the notch swallows the sun, then turn where the ground suddenly smells like pennies. Your inner ear gyroscopes hum in agreement, but they're background music. The melody is landmarks. Name them out loud. Not poetry for its own sake handles. Bison Rock, Tongue Spruce, Bite Notch. The names are like knots on a cord, and you run your thumb across each as you pass. When you return in fog, the cord is still there inside your head, and your thumb knows exactly where to stop tugging. Light joke 1. If you insist on a digital assistant, this is it. Only the battery is jerky and daylight. Look for trifectas. A single landmark can trick you, 2 look-alike stones, 2 gnarled trees, 2 notches. 3 in relationship rarely lie. Bison Rock aligned with Bite Notch, plus the creek's faint braille against your calves. That triangle nails your position the way 3 towers pin a phone. You say it under your breath. Rock-notched, splash, rock-notched, splash. A tiny chant that keeps panic out and rhythm in. Mainstream fact time, while you walk many Australian Aboriginal groups encode long-distance routes as song lines, sequences of places remembered through verses that recount a creator being's journey. Sing the verses in order and you traverse real ground. Miss a verse and you miss a turn. You hum your more modest tune and feel the same human trick at work story as map and map as story. Now texture your anchors with senses because the mind keeps what has weight. Bison Rock warms your palm in late afternoon, so it's also a timepiece. Tongue Spruce leaks lemony terpene on hot days, so it's also a thermometer. Bite Notch channels wind like a throat, so it's a seasonal whistle. Add the creek's metallic aftertaste on your tongue. Silt from upstream slate, and suddenly your anchor chain becomes a braided rope. If one thread frays, the others hold. Historians still argue whether Paleolithic people deliberately modified prominent features for navigation, stacked cairns as coded arrows, scarred trees as blazes, or whether most of the marks we find are ritual first and only accidentally helpful to travelers. You practical as a lunch basket do both without fuss, a thumb-sized stack of 3 stones on a flat. A quick scrape on bark, a twig gate leaned just so where the faint trail forks. You're careful because cairns can multiply like rabbits and confuse a stranger. Your rule is help without shouting. Quirky tidbit to stash certain ringing rocks sing when struck. If your region has one, it becomes a sonic lighthouse. 2 taps, pause, 1 tap might be your clan's. I'm here code by a fishing pool, not exactly prehistoric Wi-Fi, but the coverage is decent in valleys. Light joke 2, unlimited plan. 0 bars on mountaintops, customer support is a woodpecker. You also lean on negative anchors, the places you must never mistake. The hollow that eats footsteps where duff is deep and tracks vanish. The meadow with too much sky where storms ambush in minutes. Talking cliff where echoes make 2 feet sound like 12. You tag them with caution stories so the lesson sticks: the girl who walked straight into the sky and had to be talked back down with soup. The hunter who chased an echo and caught his own fear. Are these stories literally true? Truth works differently here. They're accurate in the way a scar is accurate about a knife. Place names shape the route's grammar. You don't say turn right. You say keep Bison Rock on the laughing side until tongue spruce starts smelling like rain, then drift toward Bite Notch. The younger ones learn the vocabulary by playing who can reach the laughing side first, who can smell rain first, who can shout at the notch and make it cough. That's navigation disguised as recess. Remember the toddler's advanced hydrology at the ford. That joke travels too. Every time a child stamps a puddle, you praise the rain gauge. Some anchors are seasonal, a snow mushroom that forms on the same boulder each winter, a shadow that slides like a sundial finger across a particular wall on solstice week. You use them as sanity checks, never as sole guides. If a shadow fails to appear clouds season fast forward, you still have your chain. If the snow mushroom dissolves early, you fall back on smell sound and the microslope you read with ankles. Redundancy isn't paranoia, it's kindness to your future colder self. You add story to memorize branching. At tongue spruce, 3 choices creek climb contour, so you weave 3 quick lines into your chant. Drink sky easy and match each word to the first footprint left by those who took the options this morning. Drink prints are deeper at the toes, eager down. Sky prints push hard at the heels, laboring up. Easy prints balance. You chose easy today because you're collecting berries at the contour where shade lasts till noon. Light joke 3 heroics are cancelled until further notice. Brunch is a strategic priority. A brief tour through the memory palace. You carry no columns, no marble, just familiar places stored in your skull. The method of Loki trick taught to Roman orators is younger than your bones, but the instinct is older. You hang the idea, bring the flaker stones on Bison Rock, as if it were a hook by your door. When you reach Bison Rock, you remember the stones. When you pass tongue spruce, you remember to check for windfall resin. When you see Bite Notch, you remember to warn the teens about the hollow where footsteps disappear. Memory isn't a list. It's a path that reliably stumbles against reminders. On the far side of the ridge, a new valley yawns. You don't panic. You appoint 3 anchors immediately, a lightning scar red on a pine, a silver throat where the stream squeezes a lopsided granite cube that looks like a bread loaf someone dropped. You walk a cautious, curious loop to test them from multiple angles. On the second pass, you add a sound note. The silver throat burbles in a 3 count, then sighs. On the third, you add a smell. Bread loaf rock hosts a minty patch at its base. Now the unfamiliar has 3 handles and 2 latches. Your fingers know what to grab. Mainstream history peers over your shoulder again. Inuit and other Arctic peoples maintain dense place name networks, where even tiny rises and snowdrift forms carry names, many describing action. The place where you upturn the sled, turning anchor into instruction. These names pile up across generations. The map outlasts a single storm, a single memory lapse, a single flashy gadget. When dusk leans in, you audit your rope. Do the anchors you chose in morning still make sense in this light? Your eyes broaden, your ears sharpen, your skin resumes its night job. Bison Rock loses color but keeps shape. Tongue spruce becomes a darker seam in the air. Bite Notch turns into a reliable bite in the sky. You touch each with attention the way a traveler touches Lucky Charms. The chain doesn't just tug you home, it tethers your nerves when fog or worry tries to blow them away. You arrive at the sandy apron by the outcrop again, a familiar page. You smooth the ground once, not to erase, but to leave a clean margin where tomorrow's first line can write itself. The anchors hold. The chant hums. The land that felt like a maze at sunrise now feels like a house. where you finally remember which corner hides the cups. You follow water because water follows rules. It never pretends. It only goes downhill, and that honesty is a compass you can hear with your feet. You don't label the direction. You label the promise thirst to creek. Creek to river, river to safe crossing, crossing to camp. The first clue's a sound. A filigree hiss that means riffles a hollow thunk that says, a log is pinned, a bright glassy chime that means pebbles are rolling in the shallows. You pause, breathe 4 in and 4 out, and let your hearing do the early steering, because ears travel farther than eyes when the land still rubs sleep from its face. Cool air pools in the drawer and spoons your shins. The scent tilts from dust to wet iron like a penny on the tongue. Gravity writes its message in texture. The slope steepens under firs. Dampness darkens soil. Moss mats thicken and hush your steps. 2 gullies become 3, braiding a slow braid you can read by color. Slate grit paints the water green-gray. Iron smudges it ruddy. Quartz flour pales the eddies to milk. You pinch a smear and taste yes slate sommelier of soil returns starched napkin and all. Light joke 1, no loyalty card required. Every sip earns points in common sense. You study the grammar of flow. Riffle run pool fast steady slow repeats like breath. Animals stand where speed turns to rest herons above the slow shelves. Otters on the slick threshold foxes at the shallow crossings where tiny fish flash like dropped needles. White V-wakes bloom around stones. The open mouth faces upstream. The arrowtail points the way the water goes. Foam scribbles linger in the lee of logs punctuation that shows you which thread is the main channel when the creek sprawls into braids. Follow the cleanest punctuation, and you follow the path other feet preferred before yours. Mainstream fact: while you walk across Paleolithic Europe, and in many other regions, camps often clustered on river terraces, those slightly raised benches just above flood level. Terraces offered dry, sleeping driftwood delivery, seasonal fish runs, and reliable fords. Archaeologists frequently find hearths and stone tools bead-strung along these benches. Even when rivers migrate, the terrace story remains. If your ancestors treated rivers as addresses, you can treat them as guides. You give the water a personality, because memory likes company. The creek sulks in late summer, low, warm, secretive. The river gets opinionated after the first cold rain, loud, silt-thick, bossy. Children remember those moods better than west-northwest, and frankly, so do you. Before a crossing, you kneel, plant a stick, and count how fast the rise wets your knuckles. Compare today's number to yesterday's. If it climbs faster, you shift to the known shallows at the gravel bar, where the current splits. Light joke 2, congratulations. Your new fitness tracker is a twig. Drainage divides are sly. They are not knife edges so much as broad, wind-quiet backs, where plants change jerseys, alder and willow surrender to pine and scrub. You walk that high, quiet line when you want options. A step left drains toward friendly camp smoke. A step right drains toward someone else's stew pots. Historians still argue whether prehistoric bands primarily navigated by watersheds, riding those divides like roads, or by far silhouettes and seasonal star bearings. Your practice is simpler. Trust gravity, confirm with cues, and never bet the whole journey on one hint. Ravines tweak your pace. The world narrows, sound gets bright, and you borrow animal certainty. Deer lay honest switchbacks, never too steep, never too showy. Beavers remodel the tempo, turning chatter into mirror with tidy dams. Fresh pencil-sharpened stumps warn that the channel ahead wants to slow you and soak your boots. You test edges with a pole, because mud that looks firm sometimes floats on a sponge of dead reeds, springy at the ankle, then treacherous at the knee. Navigation, more often than not, is that small grace of stopping before you sink. Quirky tidbit for the toolbox. River foam laces can smell faintly sweet, thanks to natural surfactants shaken out of algae and rotting leaves. Track a foam ribbon, and it will snitch on the strongest tongue of the current, even when the channel splits into braids. Follow it, And you also find insect lines, midges and mayflies, stacked over the faster seam like punctuation marks, which means fish, below, which means people, above, which usually means a decent path, on at least one bank. Light joke 3, the world's oldest tutorial uses bubbles. No skip ad button provided. Sometimes you must leave the stream to make time, so you keep it in your senses like a song you hum under your breath. The smell rides with you, a cool cellar note amid sun-baked grass. The slope steady pulls your calves toward it, even when trees hide the glitter. If you truly lose the voice, you climb to the nearest blunt shoulder, find the calm back of the watershed, and choose which way you want your mistakes to slide. Gravity is a patient teacher, and never offended if you audit the class again. Taste becomes a mentor when sight grows lazy. Springs bleed steady. Cold even on hot days. You find them by the temperature on your ankles and by the way plants choose to be lush in a drought. Sip and you'll flinch at iron or relax into the clean snap of granite. Chew a willow twig along a bend and your tongue picks up salicylates, the ghost of aspirin, which is not a compass, but it is a reminder that river medicine cabinets exist and that calm minds navigate better than throbbing temples. Inside your head, a small debate mirrors the scholarly one. If the river fell silent, could you still find it? Yes, by gulls nosing inland, by a gentle uptick in gnats, by the way the air cools where the valley tightens, by the damp flirt of wind against your calves. And if every sign failed, you would still find a ridge and listen for the old teacher. Down is always somewhere. Evening repaints familiar things. Shadows flip. The glint that shouted shallow at noon now whispers deep. Sounds carry farther. The trickle you ignored at lunch beats like a small drum. You adopt the elders' rule, never drink the map. Meaning, do not assume the river that guided you down will guide you back on the identical line. You trust redundancy instead. Foam patterns, plant teams, temperature threads, sound shadows, and that steady tug of slope your calves have learned to translate. By the time camp smoke purses into the blue of dusk, the creek's gossip has walked you unerringly to the fire circle and the sandy apron you smoothed for tomorrow's first sentence. You didn't need a needle to point north. You needed a partner that always remembers down. Water kept its promise, and you kept yours to listen. The sun isn't subtle. It's that loud roommate who flips on every light and calls it help. You use it anyway because glare shade and warmth are dependable guides you can read without ever whispering the names of directions. Morning begins with a slap of brightness on the water and a gold ribbon on your cheek. You turn your face just enough that one forearm warms and the other rests cool in its own slim shade. Keep the warm sleeve forward. Keep the cool one trailing. That's a body-sized arrow you can feel while your eyes squint only when they must. Your shadow is a gossip. At breakfast it stretches long as a story your uncle tells, pointing away from brightness like a theater usher's arm. You watch its length more than its aim. Long means early, short means the day is exhaling toward its hot middle. Long again means you're pulling evening over your shoulders. If you need a crude pace guide, you let your shadow measure your strides. When it shrinks below your height, you know you're nearing the day's steepest heat and the forest's best pockets of mercy. Light joke 1, your smartwatch today is the sun. The firmware never needs updating, but the interface can be a little blinding. You practice a simple ritual at every open patch plant, a straight stick. Count your breaths and note where the tip of the shadow drifts. 10 or 20 slow breaths later, you have motion you can trust. If the tip slides along a line you've been following, say the edge, where pale grass meets darker sedge, you keep that edge as your seam. If it veers, you veer less, letting the sky tug you gently, rather than yanking you into a thicket. Remember the twig fitness tracker you used to read. River rise sticks continue their proud service across departments. Mainstream fact to tuck into your sling. Long before pocket sundials and bronze compasses, people raised gnomons, simple vertical markers, and watched the noon shadow shrink to its shortest. In the Nile Valley, tall stones and obelisks performed that job with theatrical elegance. Their moving shade helped set daily rhythms and seasonal markers. You don't need to copy stone cutters. A sapling and patience give you the same principle in a softer key. The skin clock is more private, but no less precise. You carry 2 wrist thermometers called forearms. One side of you bakes, the other lounges. If both forearms warm equally as you walk, you're striding along the sun's highway. If one heats and the other cools, you're crossing it. You can refine the sense by attention to your ears and nose, one cheek warm, one cool, one nostril drying, one comfortable. That tiny asymmetry becomes a steering wheel you can hold while your eyes stay on the ground's grammar of scuffs and micro-slopes. Light joke 2, congratulations, your dual-booting Skin OS and Ground OS perfectly compatible, no subscription required. Aspect the way slopes face the light joins your quiet committee. In the half of the world, you're walking one set of slopes hoards damp and moss and obliging shade, while the opposite team bakes to grasses rattling pods and crispier resin. You don't name the aspects. You feel the switch when your calves slip from spongy duff to aromatic sun-steeped needles. You note where berries ripen earliest light-drunk edges and where snow sulks the longest shade-loyal hollows. Those patterns give you forward confidence. If I keep the berry-happy shoulder at my elbow and the long snow pocket brushing my hip, I'm threading the same corridor we used last season. Trees write their own sundials. In low forests, the morning shafts are slanted ladders across the path. By midday, they drop into coins. Late day turns them to cathedral aisles. If you spend one entire long day paying attention, your eyes memorize the way a certain snag's shadow reaches just to the lone fern at what you call Bison Rock before lunch, and how the tongue spruce casts a thin blade that cuts your route in the last part of afternoon. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people formalized such observations into strict calendars or kept them as flexible tells woven into walking knowledge. You take the flexible path. It resists panics and forgives clouds. Clouds do show up sometimes in drama, sometimes in blankets. When the sky closes, the sun becomes a rumor rather than a lamp. You keep your skin clock alive by noticing which side of your body dries first after a drizzle, which cheek the wind polishes, which slope smells like warm rock. And you lean on backups you built on brighter days, the chant of landmarks, bison, rock, tongue, spruce, bite, notch, the taste of the creek's minerals, the foam punctuation you learned to follow where water chooses a main channel. Think of the sun as your lead singer. The band can still play if she steps off stage for a verse. Quirky tidbit for your pocket, the finger rule at dusk. Stack finger widths between the sun and the horizon and count roughly a quarter hour for each works well enough to stage a safe last push. Thick fingers earn more, evening thin fingers less. You accept the injustice and move anyway. Use it to decide whether to contour toward that friendly terrace or halt now and set your fire where wood is easy and wind is kind. Light joke 3. If you've been lifting baskets of tubers all summer, your sunset cushion gets buff too. Sometimes the sun lies by bouncing off water, off glaze, on rock, off the pale belly of a big cloud. That's when you feel for the honesty of heat instead of chasing shine. Put the back of your hand to stone. Faces that hold warmth belong to the portion of day that just passed. Faces that stay cool were spared. If 3 stones in a row tell the same story, you trust the trend. If one contradicts, check for trickery. A reflective puddle, a quartz ribbon, a wind tunnel hiding in the trees. You're not a detective in a cloak. You're a patient cook, tasting the stew for balance. You make a small, safe game of it with the younger ones, and frankly with yourself, step from coin to coin of midday sun across the duff. Then switch to shadow entirely and notice how your breath changes. You can walk farther in shade, think better here more. The game becomes instruction. Choose shaded lines on long pushes. Accept bright exposes only when the ground pays you back in clean footing or shortcuts. Prehistoric logistics sound romantic at a distance. Up close, they are hydration, foot health, and the confident boredom of not making preventable mistakes. Out at the valley's mouth-wide fields prove that long shadows distort as badly as gossip near a fire. A boulder's evening shape is a wolf, a fortress, a problem. You blink the drama away and sit with motion instead. Every long finger of shade crawls in a single smooth sweep. Plot your lane so that sweep carries you toward known water and a known terrace rather than into reeds that look friendly until they try to drink your boots. Remember the hollow that eats footsteps. Low flat light makes that hollow invisible. Your sun sense isn't just a compass, it's hazard radar. A final history wink while you walk home. Big stone circles and chambered tombs in several old countries line up with sky events, the winter sun peaking at a certain notch, the brighter half of the year, beginning when the dawn arrows through a passage. Whether those alignments were chiefly ritual, agricultural, navigational, or all three, remains a live argument in scholarly tents. Whatever the boards vote you and your small crew use, the same dependable theatre, the bright thing climbs, here falls, there moves a little each season, and your feet use that drift to keep the story straight. The light softens, your shadow grows conversational again. You steer with warmth on one sleeve, watch the trees pour long ink across the path, and feel that click of rightness when the day's arc matches the one written in your bones. You don't chant any grand names. You shrug into dusk, and let your skin keep time, and the land pleased you're paying attention lets you through. You tip your head back and let the sky become the biggest map you own. No paper crinkles, no needle quivers, just a dark field salted with signals that keep their promises across lifetimes. You don't chase fancy constellation names tonight. You chase motions that stay true, while your feet do the practical work below. The river hums somewhere to your right. Bison rock remembers the day's heat. Tongue spruce breathes resin into the cool, and above all, that the night lays down lanes you can follow with quiet confidence. You begin with the idea every wanderer learns stars rise in the east and set in the west, sliding along dependable paths. Pick any bright one near the horizon and watch it climb as you walk. Let that slow, steady drift be your conveyor belt. If it's lifting, you're leaning toward the east of things. If it's sinking, you're easing into the west of things. You aren't reciting compass letters, you're reading choreography. The whole sky is a clock whose hands are made of light. In the north, a small mercy shines. Follow the two stars at the lip of the Big Dipper's bowl, and they point to a steady candle that seems stubbornly still. Treat that stubborn star as a hinge. Keep it a palm's width to the left of your path and you'll drift one way, a palm's width to the right and you'll drift the other. Its height above the horizon even whispers your place on Earth, higher star, higher latitude. Light joke 1. Welcome to the original GPS. Gaze at Polaris system requires no charging, but does insist on a clear night. If you journey where the spoon doesn't show, another guide steps in. The long kite of the Southern Cross leans toward an invisible point. Trace its spine 4 or 5 lengths and you have an honest south. Where neither hinge nor cross is obvious jungle canopy mountains shouldering the sky, you use the Milky Way, the spilled milk that smudges the night. In some seasons it stands upright like a pillar. In others it lies across the heavens like a pale river. Note how it leans toward familiar ridges, how it pours into a notch, or runs parallel to a valley. Sky river, echoing land river, a rhyme you can walk by. Mainstream fact to pocket while you walk. Polynesian and Micronesian wayfinders kept star compasses' mental charts of where specific stars rise and set on the horizon, and used them together with ocean swells and seabirds to sail double-hulled canoes across thousands of kilometers of open water. In recent decades, navigators aboard the canoe Hokulea revived those techniques without instruments to show the old knowledge still holds water. If people can thread entire seas by star paths, you can cross a valley by them without breaking a sweat. Planets the wanderers behave differently from the background choir. They shine steadier with less twinkle, and they stroll along a shared highway called the ecliptic. Learn that highway, and you gain a nightly road sign. If a bright bead sits on that belt, you mark it as a planet, and let its season-long drift tell you how the sky is tilting. You don't need to pronounce names. The steady one near the belt is plenty to steer by. Light joke 2 planets are that reliable cousin who always shows up to help you move house, slow patient and suspiciously consistent. You fold the moon into the map too, but as a moody partner. When it's a thin grin, its horns cradle darkness, and the grin points toward the hidden sun. When it swells, you notice which side is lit, and you remember the shine faces the missing sun. On bright nights you let the moon cast your shadow like a whisper of afternoon. On dark new moon nights you rely more on the Milky Way's pale smear and the fine gossip of starlight on leaves. Remember our rule of redundancy. Your twig fitness tracker for the river, your skin clock for the sun, and now your sky. Lanes for the dark all cross-check one another like polite elders at council. Quirky tidbit for the campfire on the stillest, darkest nights. Starlight alone can cast faint shadows. You can see if you soften your eyes on pale sand or snow. It's not a working lantern. Please do not attempt starlight spelunking, but once you've noticed your own starlit outline, the sky stops being decoration and becomes a quiet instrument. Light joke 3 shadow selfies by the Milky Way 0 likes immaculate vibes. Your chant grows to include sky beats. Rock notch splash becomes rock notch splash belt, meaning keep to the thread. While the star belt rides your right shoulder. When the belt sets and the upright column of the Milky Way takes over, the chant shortens to rock column, and your feet know to aim for the terrace where the column lines with bite notch. You're building braided anchors again. Ground cues, water cues, and now sky cues, all woven so that if one frays, the others carry the load. Historians still argue whether Paleolithic dot clusters on cave walls intentionally mirror constellations. The little Pleiades above a painted bull at Lascaux, an Orion-like figure near a reindeer, or whether we're projecting star pictures onto art with other meanings. You don't have to settle the argument tonight. You only need to notice that when that tiny bunch of Sparkle the hen and her chicks, as some call it, rises just before dawn at a certain time of year, berries ripen along your contour, and eels fatten in the river's slow elbows. The sky hands you a season stamp, and your hands collect the right food at the right bend. A practical trick helps when you forget which shining does what. If it twinkles like a mischievous candle, it's probably a star. If it burns steadier, it's likely a planet. If it crawls perceptibly across a single evening, it's a satellite which your prehistoric self politely ignores. Instead, you use arcs made by familiar asterisms, 3 stars in a row, pointing to a ruddy spark there, a crooked W leaning toward a bright bead there, to step from known to known like hopping stones across a stream. And if you doubt your eyes, you return to the ground's grammar, the crushed grass, the faint terrace, the cooler breath sliding off the hollow, to let earth confirm sky. When weather sours and clouds herd the stars into hiding, your night map doesn't vanish. It hands the job to your ears, nose and ankles again. Wind shifts, creak voices sharpen, tongue spruce leaks scent, and your skin clock resumes. The sky forgives you for not being a purist. It's a partner, not a prison. You keep a humble trick for clouded nights. If a haze glows softly in one direction, that's where the hidden moon lounges. Walk with the glow steady on your chosen shoulder, and you maintain a helpful bias that over 1,000 steps becomes a line you can trust. Mainstream history peeks in again with a tool wrapped in rumor. A sunstone, a crystal like Iceland spar, can reveal the sun's direction in cloudy skies by splitting polarized light. Sailor tales say Vikings used such stones. Experiments show the physics works, but the evidence of routine use remains thin. File it under possible, attractive, not required. You already have good instruments, a face, 2 eyes, quiet breath, and the habit of checking often. The Milky Way offers one more kindness in many places. It leans toward the same corners of the horizon at the same times each year. Spend a handful of seasons noting where its arch kisses your ridges, and you can set night corridors the way you used the sun's ladders and aisles by day. The younger ones love this game. When the Sky River pours into Bite Notch, we turn down toward the sandy apron, and they will remember it better than any lecture. Your map lives in voices, not just in lines. Fringe-flavored tidbit to smile at some old travelers, swear that certain stars sing louder on frost nights, not with ears, but with the almost audible hush that makes sounds carry. It's poetry disguised as advice. What it really means is, cold, dry air sharpens hearing, so trust your sound triangulation when your breath smokes. which is a fine reminder that our sommelier of soil foam punctuation and twig tracker all have cousins in the sky. By the time the hinge star tips toward pine tops, your route is set with a triple weave, earth signs, underfoot waters, grammar along the slope and sky lanes above. You aren't worshipping the heavens, you're collaborating. The map in your head has grown a transparent ceiling that slides as you walk, gently correcting your drift, so lost stays a small word. When camp's ember glow freckles the low horizon, you don't feel lucky. You feel literate in ground, in wind, and tonight in stars. Wind is a courier, and your nose reads its mail. You walk cross breeze on purpose, slicing the air like a lazy oar, so scent arrives in pulses. You can compare stronger, weaker, gone back again, until the pulses sink into a line you can follow. Sea days are easy. Even inland, the ocean announces itself with that faint mix of salt iodine and something like wet coins. You angle your shoulder so the tang brushes one cheek and not the other. Then keep the brush steady, an invisible shoreline riding alongside you while your feet work the ground's grammar. Smoke speaks too, and it speaks dialects. Resin smoke from tongue spruce smells citrus bitter and means camp or torch work. Grass smoke is sweet hay and means someone's cleaning a patch or pushing game. Peat smoke is old books, and patience, a signal of a hearth that plans to sit all winter. You zigzag gently to center the plume, the way a moth finds a flower. Then you mark the wind's bias against landmarks. Bison rock to your left, bite notch ahead, so even when the breeze slackens, you've pinned an arrow to the map in your head. Light joke 1, congratulations, your new navigation app is called Nostril Pro. The premium tier unlocks more walking. Sound draws lines where sight still fusses. You stop and let the forest take inventory frogs, counting in the slough, a far owl with a fat round note. Creek glass tapping stone like a tiny hammer. Hold your head still, point your nose which drags ears with it, and sway a hair left, a hair right. Loudest left. Mark it. Louder right, mark again. That micro-pendulum gives you a crude bearing without any gizmos. Now triangulate if the owl lives inside. Talking cliff, the echo-happy wall you named earlier, its hoot returns with a second, thinner ghost. That ghost marks stone, and stone joins your mental rope of anchors. Mainstream fact, while your ears do their work, ancient Mediterranean sailors named prevailing winds and treated them like roads Boreas from the north. Notos from the south, the summer Etesian winds sprinting down the Aegean, setting routes and calendars by air alone. You don't memorize Greek, you memorize how noon winds climb hills and night winds slide down into the hollows, a cycle as old as valleys. On hot days, an upslope breeze lifts pine scent and bee-wing glitter. At night, a katabatic cool washes your shins as if poured from a jug. Hills breathe, and you can walk by their breath. Your body becomes a suite of meters. Hair on forearms rises at the faintest draft when you step out from trees. The windward eye waters a touch. One ear chills while the other stays warm. You cup your hands behind your ears to grow ridiculous bat pinnae, and suddenly the creek's side channel you couldn't find is right there, bright as a silver ribbon in sound alone. Light Joke 2 audio files brag about wooden headphones. You've got the deluxe model grown straight from your skull. Smell is not just on or off, it's a gradient, and gradients point. Fishy sweetness blooms near the river's slow elbows where eels laze. Cold metallic notes lift where slate streamlets chatter. Warm bread and ash drift from terraces where someone has just kicked a hearth awake. You treat each plume as a strand and braid the strands with what your feet report, firm, terrace, here springy duff. There until the braid is strong enough to pull you forward. If the scent thins, you widen your zigzag rather than charging ahead. Moths had this figured out long before compasses. You're just borrowing the algorithm. In the open sound carries differently. Over water, a single shout slides for ages. In tall grass, even a laugh gets eaten an arm's length away. Temperature layers turn the world to theatre trickery on certain nights. Cool air overlays warm and bends sound like a lens, so surf you can't see yet. Growls into your inland camp and makes your ribs hum. Quirky tidbit. Some wanderers swear they can feel far surf as a buzz in their jaw teeth through the ground low-frequency micro-rumble that sneaks up creek beds. Whether you feel it or not, when the land starts talking in that soft thunder, you bias your path toward the long level roar. It's a coastline telling you where the world ends and begins again. Historians still argue whether prehistoric groups used whistled speech or drum codes for long-range direction. 3 notes for the ridge path, 2 for the ford, or whether such systems mostly arrived later with dense fields and villages. You don't need the verdict to benefit from rhythm. You tap a stick on your thigh in a repeating pattern while you walk. Where the echo answers crisp, you're by stone. Where it dies, you're in a sponge of brush or a sound-soaking meadow. Even your own footsteps report. Dry duff sighs, stone ticks, shallow water, chuckles, mud claps. You become your own Geiger counter for place. The wind is also a gossip about animals. Swallows stitch low before rain riding pressure changes. Ravens point like eyebrows toward carcass or camp. A sudden pocket of rank musk means boar or badger and tells you which thicket to politely avoid. Your nose can even clock time. Cold morning smoke smells long and pale. Afternoon smoke thickens and rests at your knees. Evening smoke collapses into hollows where a patient wanderer can follow it like a rope in fog. You never chase a smell without cross-checking a sound or slope redundancy. Always redundancy, and that habit trims mistakes to an embarrassment instead of an emergency. Remember the hollow that eats footsteps. It eats sound, too. You step into a place where the forest mutes birds, go to soft pencils, and even your breath seems shy. That silence is a sign you're on moss over muck or in a bowl where wind forgets to visit. You leave a twig gate at the rim so returning kids don't slide in on a happy sprint. Callbacks matter. The hollow has already taught you humility about tracks, and tonight it teaches you humility about echoes. Your inner meteorologist keeps score. The breeze warms your right cheek, day-breathing upslope. Expect easier scent reading because rising air carries messages to you. The breeze chills your shins and smells of stone, night-breathing downslope. Aim lower for smoke, which sinks along with the cooler air. You wet a fingertip for direction as you did in the dark, but you also notice drying rate desert fingers snap. Dry river fingers linger cool, and that tells you whether to expect scent highways or scent fields. Light joke 3. Your weather app just updated to version lick. Release notes. Improved cheek calibration. Bug fixes involving impatient noses. A quick practice for making sound. Draw a map you can trust. Pick an owl, a creek, riffle, and far surf. Face the owl and count slow to 4. Turn to the creek and count slow to 4. Turn to the surf and count slow to 4. Now you have a triangle you can carry. Walk 50 paces. Repeat. If the counts change, note how. Owl grows louder, surf grows softer. Creek stays the same. You're sliding along a line, angled toward trees and away from coast. You don't need numbers on your triangle, you need the direction of change. Mainstream history slips in with another anchor in the Arctic. Travelers listen for the brittle hiss of wind on sastrugi, the hard snow ridges carved by prevailing breeze, and aim their sleds to cut across or ride along those grooves depending on daylight and plan. You mirror that with grass ripples, with dune faces, with the nap of brush that leans under seasonal winds. Even in forests, leaves reveal their silver undersides flash when a gust comes from a certain quarter, and a whole hillside will turn itself like a school of fish, giving you a brief, beautiful arrow. A fringe-flavored whisper deserves a place in your pack. Some people claim they can smell rain hours before it arrives. The science story blames ozone and petrichor shaken loose by distant strikes and first drops. Your nose just calls it that green ache that makes the back of your throat cool. When you taste that ache and feel wind steady on your left cheek, you shorten plans, pick the terrace that drains clean, and collect dry kindling under leaning slabs before the world decides to drum. You make games for the younger ones, so the skills stick without lectures. Find the smoke with your eyes closed. Point to the frog pond with one ear covered. Tell me if the wind is a hill wind or a river wind by what your shins say. They giggle, fail, try, again pass. Later, when fog steals sight, those games turn into calm choices. A child who can follow surf by jaw buzz will not run toward cliffs when night thickens. They will run toward breakfast. By the time camp glow freckles the horizon, your nose is a compass rose, and your ears are a set of arrows, and the breeze kindly tonight has ferried you all the way to the sandy apron without once asking you to name north. You barely look up. The land has been humming the right song all evening. You only had to sing along. You learn to borrow other species' confidence. Birds and hoofed neighbors keep appointments with the land more faithfully than any human schedule, and if you treat their habits like bus timetables, you rarely wait long for directions. Morning starts with a scribble of swallows over the river elbow and a long, tidy V of geese sliding along the valley. You don't need a lecture on aerodynamics. You only need to notice that geese keep the same invisible avenue day after day. You slip your path to parallel theirs, not because you love birds, though fine they're stylish, but because their highway neatly skirts the bog you called the hollow that eats footsteps. Light joke 1. Congratulations, you're now on Goose Express, no baggage fees, minimal honking. Seabirds are even better traffic reporters. Inland. A string of gulls arrowing the same direction tells you which creek is throwing fish smell. At the coast, terns lift at dawn and point toward feeding grounds. Then fly home in evening like low comets. Follow morning birds outward, and you'll likely find a clean point or rip where current shears easy netting, easy orientation. Follow evening birds landward when fog grows uppity, and you'll walk to roost trees that mark the richest pocket of shoreline. Mainstream fact to fold gently into your pocket. Polynesian and Micronesian wayfinders watched landfall birds, white terns, noddies, frigate birds, whose dawn and dusk flights betray the direction of islands beyond the horizon. If entire archipelagos can be threaded by wing habits, you can cross a single bay by them without heroic sighs. Songbirds can be maps if you listen sideways. A band of alarm calls hopping along the brush edge often traces a fox or snake. Stay on the calm side of that ripple, and you're automatically in safer, quieter ground, the same ground prey prefers for uneventful travel. Raptors lift on thermals at predictable saddles. The sight of a hawk circling the same notch every bright midday pins that notch on your mental rope of anchors as surely as a cairn would. Vultures' polite euphemism, sky janitors, broadcast open country and wind lanes with their lazy tilts. You're not chasing gore, you're reading openness and air. On the ground, hoof engineers have already done your civil planning. Deer lay switchbacks that honor gravity. Bison and aurochs punch corridors through brush that never exceed the grade their lungs can forgive. Elephants, where they stroll, remember and reopen trails to water that trees respect. Those lines minimize effort the way rain carves the easiest channel. Step onto a fresh cow path and your ankles immediately stop sending hate mail. Light joke 2. Welcome to Elk Premium handcrafted gradients since forever. You don't trust any one trail the way a naive hero trusts a prophecy. You cross-check. If a game trail keeps the same contour you chose yesterday by sun and shadow, if it kisses the same terrace where foam punctuation showed the river's main seam, if it slides under the same hawk notch you watched last week, then congratulations, you're riding a verified lane. If it dives into a blind, echo-tricksy thicket headed straight for Talking Cliff, you thank the ungulates for their service and bail. Herds turn the year into a calendar you can walk. Reindeer and caribou cross particular rivers at particular bends. Pronghorn repeat historic corridors between winter desert and summer sage. Wildebeest on the far side of your map pinwheel in a rhythm so steady that all of nature sets its watch to their hooves. Historians still argue whether the upper Paleolithic reindeer economies in parts of Europe were tightly pegged to these crossings, or whether people kept broader menus and only leaned on herds when seasons allowed. You keep your menu wide and your ears open. When daylight starts arriving with a sharper angle and you hear distant clicking from tendons over hoof, you bias your loops toward the old ford where the herd will return like a tide. Game trails also tell you who else uses them. Predators keep office hours. A cat's track is neat, smug, and often right on the same soft line prey prefers, because ambush thrives where certainty condenses. Wolves and wild dogs are less precious. Their trails are scent news highways, scrawled with gossip at junctions. You treat predator lanes like busy roads, useful, fast, and worthy of extra glances. Fresh cat scat. We will be dainty and say it smells. Decisive means you skirt windward. Keep sightlines long and avoid reed mazes, even if your feet beg for softness. Your redundancy habits pay rent wind on one cheek sky belt on your shoulder. Twig tracker for the hour, none of them panic when you detour for prudence. Quirky, delightful tidbit in northern Australia. Magnetic termite mounds, tall, thin, loaf-like sculptures, tend to align roughly north-south, presenting broad faces to morning and evening sun and narrow edges to noon heat. You don't need a compass to subtract a sketch from this sculpture garden. You need only notice that the mounds point like 100 stone needles. Is it a universal law? None. Is it a party trick that doubles as a hedge when clouds silence the sun? Absolutely. The air above a path describes its own traffic, and birds annotate it constantly. Swifts scythe the downwind edge of a ridge where insects pile. Follow their barcode, and you'll reach the same glade you always like, shaded by tongue spruce and singing resin. Crows perform reconnaissance. You can poach 2 birds circling low over the far terrace, and swapping positions usually means novelty over there. Carcass camp, or a freshly opened patch of ground. Before you wander over, you cross-check with your sommelier of soil. If dust tastes fresh and hoofprints stack, the novelty is heard. If dust tastes old and prints scatter, the novelty might be people. Mainstream history nods again. Many modern roads and trading paths overlay older indigenous footways, and some of those likely grew along animal corridors that predate written memory. In parts of North America, for instance, bison traces braided into routes later walked by people, and much later widened for wheels. The names change the slope, math doesn't. You can feel that math under your soles when a trail feels right in your calves. A fringe-flavored whisper wanders through campfires. Some travelers swear they can smell bird migration. At night, a faint loamy sweetness in high air when thousands of small bodies are moving. Science points toward weather and plant smells riding the same fronts that push birds. But the advice is still practical when that sweetness lifts and the stars glitter extra hard. Expect birds to be on the move at dawn and let their new lines redraw your morning plan. You teach the young by making them bird spies. Point where swallows feed thickest. Tell me which way the geese will come back by watching their morning line. Trace the raven debate in the air until you find the log where they're arguing. They giggle point, wrong point, right then grow sharp. On fog days you play. Find land with birds along shore. Follow outbound birds to the rip, inbound birds to the roost, then follow gulls inland to the gut of the river. It becomes muscle memory, the kind that keeps feet calm when the world goes indistinct. Historians still argue whether early human dispersals out of Africa preferred inland lake and river corridors shadowing herds, or hugged the kelp highway along coasts rich in shellfish and seaweed. Your nights suggest an answer that refuses to choose rivers when rivers speak. Coasts when coasts are generous birds and beasts whispering both ways, and you weaving between them like a respectful thief of certainty. You add a few etiquette rules to keep the highway open. Never trample a salt lick to mud. Go around. When a herd is restless, watch, wait, and let uncertainty drain before crossing their line. If ravens scold, assume you're intruding on a drama, and leave them to their theater. When you must mark a choice for your people, borrow animals' discretion, a twig, gate, low and quiet, a 3-stone stack that only reads from the direction you're coming back. Never a billboard cairn that shouts and multiplies. By late light you're moving inside a living atlas geese, laying a ribbon along the sky, swallows combing. Insect rivers, deer prints, testing duff, a fox curling wind back toward its own den, and you a polite freeloader stitched among them. You skim the berry contour past Bison Rock Angle, under Bite Notch, where the hawk always finds a noon elevator, and let the village's first smoke reach your right cheek. Light joke 3, please rate your journey on animal highways today. 5 stars for the elk, 4 for the gulls, too chatty, and an honorable mention for termite mound transit, which pointed north while doing absolutely nothing else. You step onto the sandy apron by the outcrop, smooth a palm-wide strip for tomorrow's first sentence, and listen to birds settle like 1,000 tiny doors closing politely for the night. You didn't divine a path. You drafted behind professionals. The world is generous with lanes if you admit you aren't the only traveler. You don't wander so much as orbit. The year is a necklace, and you move bead to bead, returning to each bright place just when it's sweetest. Tongue spruce is not just a tree, it's the doorbell for resin season. Bison rock is not just a lump, it warms on long evenings that mean berries are blushing at the contour. The river's foam punctuation grows thick, and suddenly your hands remember net knots you didn't think about all winter. It looks like instinct from a distance. Up close, it's a calendar you carry in your bones, revised every lap. Your loop begins with tiny omens, the first insect drumming at noon, the first frog counting in the slough, the first time the wind tastes green instead of grey. You read the land like a cookbook you've spilled on 100 times, smudged beloved full of helpful stains. Spring pulls you upslope to the tuber beds that only give generously when snowmelt soaks the ridge. You step where last year's twig gates still whisper. You left them low, quiet kind. At the river, you check the gravel fan you've learned to treat as a clock when pebbles begin to shine. Like slick teeth the fish climb. If foam lace hangs in long, decisive ribbons, you anchor camp on the terrace and trust your old pattern work. Sing, sleep, thank water, repeat. Light joke one, in modern terms, you're doing seasonal meal prep. Only instead of Tupperware, you have the entire valley. By high summer, you swing laterally along the berry contour. You could walk blindfolded, don't, but you could. It runs beneath Bite Notch's evening shadow and above the damp pockets that breed midges into campaigns. Remember your skin clock from the sun section. It helps you hold the right band of slope hour by hour as the day tilts. You also carry yesterday forward in practical ways. A bundle of straight shoots cut in spring becomes quick fish skewers. Resin you pocketed at tongue spruce glazes a cracked bowl into serviceable loyalty. Even your jokes make the lap, they come in season like the berries. The loop itself is navigation. You don't have to decide from scratch. Decisions accrete. On the long walk, you hum a route chant with verses you add and subtract. Snowmelt tubers, foam fish, resin, berries, alder smoke, herd, ford, acorn, wind, dry terrace. It's not poetry to impress anyone. It's a checklist that travels like a quipu made of breath. Historians still argue whether hunter-gatherer seasonal rounds were tightly scheduled circuits or elastic spirals that flexed with weather, neighbors, and luck. Your version refuses tidy categories. You have preferred pages, and you're not sentimental about skipping one if the paragraph is missing this year. Mainstream fact to store alongside those berries, your brain literally builds a cognitive map. Neurons in your hippocampus place cells fire for specific locations, while grid cells in nearby cortex light up in a honeycomb pattern as you move, providing a kind of internal graph paper. In humans, taxi drivers who memorize city mazes show hippocampi that adapt with experience. You feel this as familiarity that thickens. Paths walked become paths owned, and the year's loop becomes a book you can open to any chapter. You write marginal notes in the land for your future self. In spring, you cache a stack of flint cores under a specific ledge, 2 bends from the ford. In fall, you'll be grateful not to heft rock across the ridge. That habit has fossils archaeologists find tool caches, carefully buried packets of stone blanks and finished points, waiting where mobility makes hauling foolish. Your version is humbler, but rhymes a coil of cordage tucked under a peeled slab, a handful of good fire drills hung in a dry cave mouth you know you'll roost in when storms herd the sky. Light joke, too, if your future self could leave you a note. It would say, "You're welcome, also drink water." Some cues are public. Anyone with a nose and patience can read them. Others are clan-specific. The way this exact bends mint snap means go easy. The way that exact anthills bustle means we're a week early for nuts. You garden the wild without pretending to farm scatter seeds from a good stand as you leave. Break the crust around a struggling tuber patch with a stick. To let rain in, set a fire line under elder's eye, so next year's grass is tender, fence-high, and cooperative for game. Mainstream practice in many places, this careful burning and tending turns your loop into a long friendship rather than an extraction. The map is not a static drawing, it's a relationship call and response. Quirky tidbit to make you smile when you pass a crumbly rock pile, pack rat, middens, those hoarder rats' garbage heaps. Cemented by crystallized urine, can preserve seeds and plant bits for tens of thousands of years. Scientists use them to reconstruct old environments. Translation: messy neighbors become perfect archivists. You cleaner than a pack rat, but inspired by the principle, sometimes tuck story shells or distinct pebbles at decision points so small hands can read a junction by touch. You also track the sky's seasons as much as the soil's. When that tiny cluster of sparkles, the hen and her chicks you noticed before, rises just before dawn, you know your berry contour will ask for baskets. When nights start fattening earlier and crickets soar louder, you shift the loop toward nut groves and herd fords. Rivers write their diaries on banks. You read the height of mud smears on willow to predict whether a crossing will behave. Wind writes its temper on grass heads. You choose leeward lanes for long pushes so feet stay steady. Jokes stay light and morale never needs a lecture. Your loop includes people too. Rendezvous places become their own anchors, marked not by big cairns, but by predictable habits. If fog pens us in, circle to the sedge elbow and sing the smoke song at dusk. Children learn that loss is seldom permanent because the loop has multiple reunion points braided into it. You treat lost as a small weather that the circuit shrugs off. The hollow that eats footsteps turned you cautious. The sandy apron you smooth at the outcrop turns you welcoming to tomorrow. Light joke 3, your annual planner is a string bag with berry stains and a faint smell of wood smoke, not sold in stores. On quiet afternoons, you practice time the way you practice direction. You scratch a phonology strip into your memory today. The first swallows stitched the ridge. Yesterday the river cleared after rain. Tomorrow, if wind keeps tasting like stone, katabatic drafts will carry camp smoke down valley earlier. You narrate these tiny shifts aloud because voice helps glue time to place. That narration becomes gentle theater for the young who can hear the first cicada winner gets out of berry sorting. And in 10 years you find that they hum the same strip without thinking. The loop saves energy, which is another way of saying it saves you. Your feet know where the ground is kind. Your eyes know where shade pools at noon. Your hands know where dry wood hides under overhangs long after storms. And you're never stuck with one alphabet. If berries fail, your water song grows louder. If fish runs, shrink your herd, verse lengthens. The braided redundancy you've been building, sun and shadow sky belt and foam lace, wind brush, and owl echo, pays out here as options that keep mistakes small and recoverable. Scholars still argue whether residential mobility moving camp often, or logistical mobility. Sending out task groups while camp stays longer dominated deep time, and whether climate swings forced switches between the two. Your practice is, again, more boring and more beautiful. Do what the year asks. Stay longer when a terrace feeds you and neighbors are cordial. Range farther when a late frost sulks, and the meadow. With too much sky starts rumbling trouble. The cognitive map that grows in your head is not a grid. It's a weather of habits that thicken and thin with need. Come evening, when bite notch starts gnawing a rectangular bite out of the sunset again, you can feel the lap you're on settle into place with satisfying clicks. Tubers dug, resin, jarred fish, smoked berries, stained into smiles. Nuts drying in baskets above a modest hearth. You smooth the sandy apron for tomorrow's first sentence. Hang a bundle of kindling under the dry lip for your later self. And whisper the root chant once, so the day knows you noticed. The necklace closes. It's not a leash. It's a way of saying yes to a year that is kind enough to return. You start singing your turns because songs don't drop when your hands are full and your brain is busy watching your ankles. You don't belt opera at Bison Rock. You hum a tune that fits your stride, 4 soft steps to the lift of the melody. A held note where the creek slows a little fall when the path dips under tongue spruce's resin breath. Rock 2, notch 2, splash, hold. That small chorus turns choices into choreography. Your feet can remember even when fog turns the world to wet parchment. Your voice clips place names into verbs. You don't say bite notch. You sing notch bites the sun turn. You don't say the hollow that eats footsteps. You sing hollow eats circle high. The shape of the words carries the shape of the ground bites is a sharp consonant that snaps you left. Circle is a round vowel that keeps you gentle. The tune gets traded like bread. A good line spreads until the whole crew is making the same turn in the same place without looking clever about it. Light joke 1, congratulations, you've invented hands-free navigation. No Bluetooth, just breath. Rhythm is your metronome and your measuring tape. You count quiet paces under the song, so the verse equals distance. From the sedge fan to the sandy apron, 2 verses and a refrain. From the pebble bar where foam punctuation wrote its lace to the older bend, where eels lays 1 verse breath, 1 verse. Miss a refrain because you stopped to admire Goose Express or to taste dirt like a soil sommelier, and you don't panic. You hum backward. Songs have reverse gear built in. Mainstream fact to tuck into your pocket while you hum. Researchers of oral tradition like Milman Parry and Albert Lord showed that epic bards used formulaic phrases and repeating structures to hold hours of story in memory meter and stock lines acting like hooks on which meaning hangs. Different coast, different time, same human trick. Your stock lines are tiny shadow ladder on the path, silver throat of the stream, mint at breadloaf rock. Say them out loud and the place snaps into focus as if called by name. You add percussion because your body loves gadgets it can grow. A stick taps go easy at the contour. A hollow log gets 2 knocks where the trail splits and dives toward talking cliff. A dry gourd rattles to warn the little ones about the hollow that eats footsteps. The sounds glue to locations so tightly that hearing a certain thump, later, years later, throws your feet into the right lane before your thoughts even show up with coffee. Light joke 2, your notification settings are tap, thump, rattle, do not disturb unless there's a boar. Names become compasses when you stack them. Bison warms, berries, blush hawk rides, notch bites. That's not poetry to win applause. It's a breadcrumb chain you can recite while your eyes are busy reading scuffs and your skin is reading breeze. Historians still argue whether cup and ring marks and pecked spirals on old stones served as ritual only or doubled as waymarkers and memory prompts along routes. You don't carve a verdict tonight. You hang a memory anyway. A 3-stone stack that only resolves into an arrow if you're walking home, a twig gate angled just so. A story you tell every time you pass that says this is where we say, turn. Quirky tidbit you'll like when fog sticks. Some highland and island peoples use whistled speech like the silbo of La Gomera to carry messages across valleys. A single whistle can mean water here or go higher. You don't invent a full whistle language, but you steal the principle. 1 long tone hold the path. 2 short check the slope. A rising slide wind change on your left cheek. The kids turn it into a game first and a habit later. That's perfect. Play sticks better than rule. You keep your songs short and repeat them into bones. On long pushes the chant thins to a lullaby, so your breath and the rhythm marry 4 in 4 out the same beat you've used since the first night. The melody softens when shade pools and brightens, when the duff turns to stone coins underfoot. You don't need perfect pitch. You need consistent cues. If you lose the tune, you gather your other redundancies with a little inventory sun on 1 forearm, wind licking 1 shin. Foam lace pointing the river's main seam, and the song finds you again. A small history postcard drifts in from cold water far to the north. Inuit carvers shaped tactile maps from wood coastlines in the hand that paddlers could read by finger as easily as eye. And far across warm seas, navigators of the Marshall Islands lashed stick charts that abstracted swells, currents, and atolls, memory aids more than literal maps. You nod at both and keep singing. Your charts are sound. Your swells are syllables. The shape in your mouth has the same job as the stick on the lap of a sailor. Don't let the root unravel. You stitch people to place with chorus. At the ford, everyone sings the same 8 beats while crossing step for stone, so the toddler who once conducted advanced hydrology knows exactly when to lift feet. At Tongue Spruce, the resin season song carries a warning about sticky hands on hair, a lesson purchased the hard way. And you all laughed. All back humor is free, and the laughter itself becomes a tag on the map. Later, if Fog coughs out of Bite Notch and tries to swallow Path and Nerve together, you start the resin song, and your feet remember which way the joke points. Light Joke 3. You upgrade your chant with a premium feature called Napping Verse, a soft hum. You can resume after a doze without losing the thread. Side effects include drooling and improved morale. You hang other memories on the same line. Bring Flaker Stones at Bison, check Eel Pot at Silver Throat, shake the mint at Bread Loaf Rock to wake the bees, and every errand piggybacks on the route, so you never waste a turn. This is the method of Lochi without columns place as hook as instruction. When the year loops, the song loops too. Verses drop out in lean seasons, come back fat when rain is generous. No shame. The map is a duet between weather and you. There's room for disagreement in the tent, and you admit it. Historians still argue whether deep time people encoded formal star calendars into chants, or whether sky verses stayed looser belt at right shoulder berries now and got sharpened only when voyages lengthened. You run the humble version belt rides, you're right. When hen and chicks rise before dawn, carry bigger baskets. If you need finer guidance, you stack other cues, owl, echo, wind, temperature on your shins, the way dew thins on the contour, and you let the chorus not a solo steer. A fringe-flavored whisper tucks itself into your bundle. Some swear that certain drums remember a path that is the beat pattern. That worked last season feels instantly right when you smack it again beside the same sedge fan. Science calls that embodied memory and rhythm entrainment. You call it my hands knew before my mouth explained. When hands and breath agree, your steps relax, and relaxed steps are precise steps, the kind that glide over the hollow that eats footsteps without donating a boot. Children learn the script by play more than lecture. You make a treasure route in daylight, 5 landmarks, 5 silly lines, and run it at dusk with laughter and glow embers. Bison warms means palm to rock. Notch bites means shout into the bite and wait for the cough. Sedge says shh means quieter feet. By the third run, even the smallest ones can hum the skeleton in order. A year later, on a fog-tangled morning, those same small ones hum without prompting and steer you tiny, pleased captains past the wrong split you almost took. When fatigue frays focus, story mends it. You tell the tale of the elder who forgot the last verse and walked past the mint at Breadloaf Rock, and how all the bees laughed and followed him like a cloak until he apologized with a bowl of water. True, maybe not. Useful, definitely. The story locks the mint in place on the map, and bonus, no one will kick that patch getting fancy with a spear dance. By the time dusk braids river hiss with resin breath, and the sky river leans toward Bite Notch again, your throat is tired in the good way, and your feet know every turn the song asked of them. You step onto the sandy apron, smooth tomorrow's margin, and let the last refrain slip out. Soft rock, 2-notch, 2, splash hold. It isn't mystical, it's mechanical and kind. Words become handles on the dark, and the dark held gently lets you through. Weather is a bossy editor. You keep multiple drafts. Blue morning, you read the ground's grammar pressure signs, micro slopes, dew lanes. Grey noon, you switch to handrails edges. You can follow without seeing much at all. A stream's cool breath on your calves, the ridge's wind on one cheek, the berry contour's patient shade. When storms muscle in or fog folds the hills into a pocket, you don't get brave. You get redundant. Rule of 3, never trust a single cue when the sky is in a mood. Pair it with 2 others. Wind bias, slope bias, sound triangulation, and let the majority vote carry you. Start with a go, sire, no-go ritual that fits in a breath. 1 plant a stick by the river and count. If the water rises a knuckle in 10 slow breaths, crossings are cancelled. 2 scan the sky's texture. If ragged grey is sprinting under smooth grey squalls are lining up like impatient hunters. 3 taste the air. If it flips from warm bread to cold iron on a steady wind, big rain rides it. If 2 of 3 say be polite, you adjust. Light joke 1, congratulations. You've built a weather app with 1 stick and 2 nostrils. Notifications are mostly damp. You choose camps with the editor in mind. Terraces, those sweet benches above, flood tantrums, stay your default. You angle fire so sparks don't climb into tongue spruce's resin hair, and you sleep with the wind at your back, not in your face, so smoke hands you warmth without stealing your breath. Lightning lessons you learned from the meadow. You named too much sky, don't be the tallest thing. Cuddle low ground near taller, calmer friends. Count between flash and thump. If thunder sits right on the light, you sit right on your pride and wait. When fog unrolls like wool and eats talking cliff and bison rock in one gulp, you switch to handrail walking. You let the creek be your fingers. You travel with the sound on one side and the chill on the same calves, keeping that pairing like a dance hold. Where the bank turns to the hollow that eats, footsteps you don't march in. You step up to dry ground and shadow the water by sound alone, checking with your twig tracker for time and the faint hiss of foam punctuation to confirm main channel. Historians still argue whether deep time travelers formalized such fog protocols or simply grew them as habits. Your crew inherits a tidy list because tidy lists make tomorrow possible. You also leave breadcrumbs that rain can't erase. Cairns sometimes, but you obey courtesy rules. In open stone country, you build low directional piles. Double stone on the go, this way side, single on the ignore me side, never the shouty stacks that multiply until every boulder has a hat. In wooded hills you use blazes so thin that only a returning eye catches them. A diagonal scrape on the down trail side, a whisper of peeled bark at knee height, where the split is sneaky. Where you go, eco-vanish twig gates angled like arrows that collapse after 2 days leaf fans brushed into a chevron that wind erases. The point isn't to decorate, it's to thread a needle and then let the cloth heal. Mainstream fact for your risk kit. Far to the north, Inuit and other Arctic peoples raise Inuksut stone figures whose sturdy silhouettes serve as navigation aids, hunting markers, or messages on wide, unreadable ground. They're not generic sculptures. They're specific, social, and informative. Your modest stacks are cousins less grand, more temporary, but they hum with the same idea, make the land readable when weather hides its usual subtitles. Rain forces more edits. Mud lies. A surface that looks firm may be a skin over soup. You test with a staff, listen for the hollow clap that means boot trap, and prefer the quiet tick of firm gravel. Slopes that were jokes in sun turn to slides. You zigzag and take the deer's patient switchbacks because elk premium has better safety features than hero mode. You keep socks dry like a religion because blisters write maps of misery across your feet. Light joke 2, the only waterproof thing you own is your stubbornness. Please do not submerge. Redundancy extends to people. You don't just try to stay together, you carry rendezvous verbs that fire without debate. If fog pens us in circle to sedge elbow and sing the smoke song at dusk, if the creek runs brown and loud, meet at the bread loaf rock when the silver throat drops to a whisper. If somebody twists an ankle, we make a dry nest on the terrace and 2 go for help along the berry contour. No hero shortcuts through reed mazes. The little ones learn the script as a game long before weather turns serious. When separation happens, and it will, because ground and nerves conspire, the script collapses panic into choreography. You also keep your map reversible. Songs that got you out get you back. You hum them backward on purpose on easy afternoons because fog likes to bully memory into forward-only thinking. You practice aiming off deliberately, biasing toward a strong feature so you never miss it, and wander like shooting for bite notches left shoulder so you know to turn right on contact. The river has taught you that lesson a dozen times better, to hit the terrace clean and walk back along it than to sort of guess and miss the silver throat completely. A quirky practical tidbit, you tie a grass blade or thin cord lightly around one finger before you enter pea soup fog. If the blade keeps tickling the windward side, you've held your bias. If it flips, your drift has doubled back. It's a crude, silly tell, But silly tells save hours and hours in cold rain, turn jokes into trouble. Also bonus, the kids love the tickle compass. Storm signs borrow all your senses. Sky green. Take cover. Hail likes drama. Birds vanish from open air. Mean things ride the wind. Your nose pulls cure. Petrichor wet stone and plant oils before drops touch your shoulders. Your forearms roughen at the whisper of a downdraft. You stack those impressions with a ground rule you stole from the river: never drink the map. Translation: don't assume the path that got you here is the path that will get you back under different weather. Update check hedge. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age cairn chains along coasts were chiefly ritual monuments or daylight navigation lines for travelers skirting treacherous shoals. You shrug and take the generous answer. People mark what matters, and home this way matters enough to get a stone lifted. You work smaller, but your motives rhyme. Your 3-stone home arrow by the fork. It speaks as softly to a future tired you as any grand pillar speaks to a sailor. At night, redundancy means sky plus skin plus sound. If clouds bury your gaze at Polaris system, you carry the Milky Way's column or river in your memory, and back it with Owl Creek surf triangles you can count with your chin swivels. If darkness thickens to velvet, you slow until your balance stops complaining, vestibular clues wobble in panic, and you trade distance for certainty. You become a metronome, 4 in 4 out 4 down, a rhythm that prevents the sprinting mistakes fog loves to reward. Fire management is risk management too. You angle your pit so wind licks the leeward edge. You keep a mat of wet duff at arm's reach. You never feed resin-rich gusts during tantrum gusts, unless you enjoy running after orange confetti. Remember crocodile dung sunscreen? Fine, it wasn't our best idea. Remember foam punctuation on the river that was. You call back the competent tricks and let the questionable ones sleep in the story bag. Light joke 3. Your emergency kit contains cordage, a dry ember bundle, and an extremely judgmental voice that says, "We can turn around," in the exact tone of your wisest auntie. You keep caches honest. A bundle of drills under a rock lip noted in your song. A pouch of flakeable stone at Bison Rock. Dry tinder where rain seldom kisses. Archaeologists find stone tool caches that shout planning across 10,000 years. Your version whispers the same. And when weather eats paths, those whispers grow loud enough to steer. Finally, you rehearse kindness. If someone freezes the fear kind, you hand them a job so small it becomes a bridge. Tap the staff 3 times when the creak sound grows louder. Hum the resin verse until we hit tongue spruce. Check my shadow coin every 10 paces. Focus shrinks weather to a manageable size. You'll arrive late and tired, not epic and missing. The sandy apron by the outcrop will still be there, a margin waiting for tomorrow's first sentence. The world forgives cautious walkers. By the time camp smoke lifts in a polite column and rain writes its silver chords between you and Bite Notch, you're already home in the ways that matter. Redundancy isn't fear, it's friendship with the land under different moods. You hedge, you hum, you check twice, and lost gets demoted from fate to brief inconvenience, one edit among many in a story that still makes perfect quiet sense. You start by letting the little ones carry the map, because a map carried becomes a map kept. You don't hand them parchment. You don't own parchment. You hand them jobs sized like their hands. You are wind nose. Tell me which cheek the breeze kisses. You are foam reader. Point to the longest lace. You are shadow coin keeper. Count how many steps until the sun coin becomes a blade. When they giggle and guess, you pretend to be surprised, even when they're right, because delight is glue, and you want these clues to stick forever. Morning lessons hide inside errands. You walk the berry contour where Bite Notch begins its evening bite, and you assign roles that rotate like a game. The front child is path whisperer, reading crushed sedge and polished root. The middle child is sound arrow, calling the creek's nearest riffle. The back child, always the wiggliest, becomes last eyes a watcher for the twig gates you left last season. You set an easy tempo, 4 steps to a breath, 4 breaths to a verse, so their bodies learn, measure the way yours did quietly without quizzes. Light Joke 1. The only exam is find lunch, and the grading rubric is mercifully edible. You make a sport of it because sport remembers. Scent rope, they walk cross-breeze with eyes closed while you nudge them left or right, stronger, weaker, until they can center a smoke thread all by themselves. Echo counting. They call into talking cliff and count the cough. Then they turn and call into the sedge and count the soft nothing. Then they point to stone or sponge and grin because the land answered. Foam spelling at the river, you kneel together and read the froth's long cursive where it lingers, where it streaks, and they draw little fingers along the main seam that will make their feet sure across the ford. You teach ground grammar as a treasure hunt. Pressure's signs become letters they can spot. Kicked pebble, comma, scuffed duff, dash, saucered mud, period. The prize is a handful of mint at breadloaf rock, or the right to knock the hollow log that marks the contour split. Sommelier of soil returns. You let one brave tongue taste a pinch of dust and declare clay cake or river flower, and you solemnly announce their junior badge. Light Joke 2 certificate printed on the air framed by laughter. Valid wherever dirt exists. Rite of passage days are quieter and slower. You choose a mild fog, not a wicked one, and you let a near-grown child take the lead while you trail a dozen silent paces behind. The rule is gentle redundancy. They must carry 3 threads at all times, wind on one cheek, sound on one side, slope in their ankles. If one thread frays, they stop, breathe 4 in and 4 out, and repair it before moving. When panic nibbles which it will, you hand them a tiny job that shrinks fear. Tap your staff when the creak grows louder, or hum the resin verse until tongue spruce finds us. Nothing heroic, just a return to rhythm. Mainstream fact to tuck in their pockets as you walk navigators in Polynesia. Train apprentices by building a star compass in the mined houses on the horizon, where named stars rise and set, and the crew practices at sea until those houses feel as real as islands. The lesson isn't become a canoe master tonight. It's put sky and sea into your body, one easy house at a time. Your inland version uses the river's silver throat, the Hawk's noon elevator at Bite Notch, and the way Bison Rock keeps late warmth. Houses all of them places in the head you can touch. You make night drills seductively cozy. First, a game by the fire. Everyone closes eyes and points to the owl, then to the creek's highest tinkle, then to the soft thunder where far surf hums through the bones of the valley. Winners choose the bedtime story. Losers fetch 1 extra log, small, polite, and ungrumpy. Later you step away in pairs and teach the hinge star, the stubborn candle that barely moves, and the sky belt that rides a shoulder like a sash. On clouded nights you show the trick of the hazed moon, a pale bloom in the grey, and how to keep it steady on one cheek to hold a lane for 100 quiet steps. Historians still argue whether these lessons in deep time were formalized curricular structured rites with fixed sequences, or whether they were mostly lived apprenticeship, absorbed between errands and laughter. You tilt toward apprenticeship with a handful of memorable rites. First fog walk, first solo ferry of embers from the old fire to the new. First time allowed to place a 3-stone arrow at the fork. The rite matters less than the repetition surrounding it. A single ceremony is a spark. Hundreds of gentle drills are the hearth. You sneak arithmetic into music. The resin song has 4 beats to a turn at tongue spruce. The ford has 8 beat stones across. On long pushes you count paces between shadow coins, then ask the youngest to hum the count backward, so they learn that back is as valid as onward. You add a nonsense verse for when the crew is tired, syllables soft as moss, because lullabies keep the feet from sprinting into avoidable mistakes. Light Joke 3. The chorus also doubles as a nap spell. Side effects include drool and improved patience. You model rescue without drama. If you don't see us, we are at Sedge Elbow by dusk. If the river runs brown, we meet at Breadloaf Rock when the silver throat whispers. If you feel big feelings, sit and make water a small problem in your hands. Melt snow, fill a cup, listen to it. Sitting still becomes an art. How to tuck into a hollow out of wind. How to warm hands on stone that drank afternoon sun. How to build a low, polite fire. that tells smoke to lie down. The younger ones learn that lost shrinks when you stop sprinting. Movement is not always the medicine. You let them lay tiny maps for future selves. A thin blaze at knee height on the down trail side of a tricky split. A twig gate aligned like an arrow that collapses after 2 sleeps. A whisper cairn that only reads as a home arrow from one direction. You lecture once about not building hats on every boulder because hats grow into confusion. Then you make it a game best quiet sign wins a story. Quiet signs win because they demand attention from the right people and disappear for everyone else. Quirky tidbit for the fire circle in some places. People walk with the Greater Honey Guide, an actual bird that leads humans to wild hives with chattering calls expecting a share of wax and larvae in return. You show the kids how to listen for chatters that aren't quite scolds and how to move in a way that says, partner not predator. Even if honey guides don't live here, the moral travels some lanes are collaborations. Learn to recognize invitations. You coach their bodies into instruments. Stand them where morning wind climbs hills and ask them to feel how shins chill first. Walk them along the berry contour until their calves predict the microslope before eyes confirm it. Have them place palms on stones at dusk and tell which faces met afternoon, which met morning. Eyes will mislead. Ankles, cheeks, and fingers lie less. An open debate you name aloud so they learn to enjoy questions. Are we born with a decent dead reckoning sense? Some tiny magnet in our meat, a natural grid that keeps the sketch straight? Or do we build it entirely by rehearsal? You tell them the honest version your sketch sharpens with practice, but it drifts without landmarks. Your eyes and ears and skin make the edits that keep the sketch true. So you practice. Often. Kindly. You teach refusal as a skill. At the meadow you named Too Much Sky, you demonstrate turning around in style, no sulking, no proving. You point to the cat track that says ambush, and to the sky scrap that says hail, and to the wind that stopped being your friend. And you say, the land says later. A child who sees you pivot will pivot someday without asking permission and return with dry socks and a good mood. Their diploma, by the way, is dry socks. On bright afternoons you let them lead the whole loop. Bison rocks warmth, tongue spruces lemon breath, bite, notches cough. The silver throats pulse, the sandy apron waiting for a hand to smooth it. They forget a verse recover with a grin and plant a small 3-stone home arrow you will see months from now and feel your chest loosen. The map has migrated from your body to theirs, which is the only migration that matters more than geese. By firelight, when the day thins to ember and the kid's hair smells like smoke and resin, you ask them to tell the route back to camp with eyes closed. They whisper huck to, notch to splash hold, and their voices make a low river in the dark. You listen proud and sleepy, and you know that if tomorrow drops fog, like a curtain, small feet will still choose the sandy apron. Not luck. Practice. Unfamiliar country starts, where your anchors go quiet. Bison Rock is behind you. Tongue Spruce's lemon breath falls out of the air, and Bite Notch is only a rumor of teeth on a far horizon. You don't know how to bite back. You don't pretend confidence. You rehearse caution. First principle. Build a lane out of things that can't move, ridges, rivers, shorelines, and then nibble outward in loops that always return to that lane. A ridge becomes your handrail, a creek, your fence, a skyline, notch, your backstop. You test forward, you arc back, you test again like a polite guest knocking on a new door instead of barging into the kitchen. Your feet make scouting loops small enough to memorize without heroics, out by 100 easy paces, left 20 to feel slope, back by 90 to hit the handrail on purpose, aiming off so you never miss then, right 30 to taste a second possibility. The loops braid into a fan of knowledge. Light joke one, congratulations, you've invented Explorer Wi-Fi, wandering in circles until the signal strengthens. Breadcrumbs matter more than bravado. You avoid the billboard cairn and choose quiet signs that read only to your returning eyes. Twig gates angled low, a 3-stone home arrow that resolves from one direction, only a whisper of peeled bark at knee height on the down trail side. You sing a new verse, short and obvious. Ridge hums, creek cools. Notch waits, and you repeat it until the air itself seems to hum along. If fog steps out from behind a shrub like an overeager actor, you already have a script and a stage mark to stand on. Strangers' fires become letters you can read at a respectful distance. Resin smoke bites citrus. Grass smoke is sweet hay. Peat smoke smells like old books and patience. A plume that pulses flourish calm, often means tended cooking. A smear that hangs low in a hollow on a windless afternoon can be a banked hearth and a plan to stay. You never walk straight in. You circle downwind so your scent arrives before your silhouette. You let sound carry introductions, 2 taps on wood, a rest, 1 tap, the same code you use at home. Then you wait where the ground gives you kindness. Firm footing, long sight lines, and shows your hands in the open. Diplomatic feet show up slow soles, quiet toes, unargumentative. Mainstream fact for the pouch archaeologists can often trace obsidian tools to their volcanic birthplaces by chemical fingerprinting. Those source signatures reveal ancient exchange networks stretching across valleys and mountains, stone from one fiery hill riding in pockets and baskets to camps hundreds of kilometers away. Translation for your walk: people meet people, lanes cross, curiosity travels with courtesy and often with gifts. If a stranger's hearth smells of fish you don't know, and their grinding stone glitters a little differently, you've found a new page in the atlas. You rid camps without measuring tapes. A low, tight ring of stones with many small charcoal flecks, and a mat of cracked shell nearby suggests patient boiling and families. A sparse scatter with long, fat charcoal, and a bone splintered into sharp flakes says quick roast for travelers. The ash color tells timing: black and hot, someone's close. Gray and fluffy hours, pale and sifting last night or dawn. You study footprints because ground is honest, deep adult heels and quick small toes. Children playing hint at a place that expects company. A lone, cautious line that skirts open spaces and hugs brush tells you to announce yourself long before your shadow does. Historians still argue whether early foragers drew hard territorial lines, no-go borders defended with ritual and violence, or whether ranges overlapped like soft-edged clouds with marriage trade and feud braided together. You live in the argument by erring on kindness, walk with open hands, borrow lanes without carving your name into them, pay for borrowed knowledge with news songs or a small tool that can be spared. If the wind tastes hostile smoke gone sharp, dogs agitated the air itself tight. You pivot like you taught the children at too much sky, no sulking, just later. You build new anchors quickly but gently. In a strange valley, you appoint the first 3 honest features: lightning scar, pine; silver shelf, waterfall; bread loaf, granite's cousin, then test them from multiple angles so your mind's rope doesn't kink. You add senses to weight them. Scar pine leaks sap with a pepper note. Silver shelf throws a constant 3-count sigh. Granite's cousin grows mint at its toes, you know that trick. 2 days later, those 3 are as solid in your head as Bison Rock ever was, but you still keep the ridgeline handrail and the creek fence because redundancy is not paranoia. It's travel insurance you can carry on your back. Quirky tidbit for the night: file rotting wood in some forests glows with foxfire bioluminescent fungi shining a faint green. It's not a lantern, but it is a shy, low light you can use as a "do not blunder here" thread along a tent rope or the lip of a drop. You don't build runway lights. You tuck 2 glowing slivers by the tricky route you want sleepy feet to avoid. Light joke 2. Welcome to Firefly. Airline's in-flight snack is whatever you brought, and the seatbelt sign is a mushroom. You treat unhelpful openness as a problem to be shrunk. In a wide, pathless basin that wants to erase you, you draw a box with legs, walk one edge, by counting slow breaths, turn walk the next, and so on. Always returning to the corner marked by a polite cairn and a hummed note. Your box is small enough to keep in your head, large enough to learn something non-random about the place where wind sharpens, where ground dries, where birds argue. You stack boxes like tiles until a pattern appears. Foam punctuation thickening along a buried channel. Owls preferring one ragged fringe of trees, the land itself offering you a diagonal that feels like a road. When water plays coy, You read plants that vote with their roots. Alder and willow cluster where toes can drink. Tamarisk's gossip in the places it lives says wet feet not far below. Grasses deepen in color where seepage threads. You don't need to name species like a scholar. You need to sort teams, lush, tough, gossiping plants versus some stoic, drought-smug ones, and follow the gossips until your shins cool. You also practice turning one good clue into a lane. If wind arrives steady on one cheek, you keep it there while you weave within sight of the ridge handrail. If surf growls faintly, you keep the jaw hum constant while you translate dunes and whistles into a contour that costs the least breath. If the sky belt slides along your right shoulder, you let it keep sliding there and trust that over an hour that soft bias becomes a faithful line. You never bet on a soloist. You run a trio sky-wind ground and let the harmony carry you. Mainstream history taps your shoulder with a cautionary postcard. Some rock art panels and standing stones seem to face traveler corridors, ridges, passes, river bends. Whether they mark boundaries, invite story sharing, or warn mind your manners is debated. You interpret generously and adjust your behavior eyes down to show you're not counting people, voice low fire small. When you leave the place ready for its next readers. Curiosity itches, but you scratch it with patience. You take the time to watch how smoke stacks over strangers' roofs at sunset. Short and busy means cooking. Long and languid means conversation. No smoke at all means hunting or a camp struck. You leave gifts when you borrow a Ford you didn't find 2 good straight chutes and a length of cord under a rock lip, and you hum your thanks. The way you hum directions, because gratitude like rhythm keeps you from sprinting into mistakes. A fringe-flavored whisper murmurs at the edge of your practice. Some travelers claim the body feels direction in new places after a day or two, as if an inner needle learns the smell of where you're sleeping and points home. Science files that under dead reckoning plus habit. You file it under useful, if humble. You still set handrails, hum roots, and leave quiet arrows for your later self, because needles, inner or iron, can still be jostled by weather hills and nerves. Light joke 3, the official flag of the cautious explorer, is a string bag full of snacks and a very boring plan. Boring plans get you to interesting stories. By the time you've stitched 3 solid anchors into the new valley and taught your feet the least expensive contour, it stops feeling foreign and starts feeling legible. You smooth a new sandy margin somewhere safe, a pocket of terrace that drains and smiles, and you add one line to the big song that has been growing all journey scar shelf loaf home. Tomorrow you'll test the line backward. Next week you'll let a younger one lead it in fog. Next season, it will feel as dependable as the walk from fire to sleeping mat. You didn't conquer a land, you learned its verbs and agreed to speak politely. The world responds to that dialect with directions. Open water looks like blank paper from shore, and blank paper makes nerves loud. You quiet them by finding handrails that don't look like rails at all. Long, low swells that carry yesterday's weather in their backswind that keeps choosing one-cheek birds that stack into sky ribbons toward land, and clouds that park over islands like friendly umbrellas. You don't chase a straight line. You stitch a reliable bias and let time turn that bias into a lane. Start with swell the ocean's memory. Wind scribbles chop. Distant storms write sentences that outlive the wind. Knees and hips feel those slow paragraphs long before eyes do. Count them the same way you count breaths on the trail. 4 gentle lifts to a verse and decide who rides your shoulder. Keep the long swell on the right. Keep the little chop slanting across the bow. That's your sea version of sun on forearm and wind on cheek. If a second swell appears from another quarter, you read the crosshatch checkerboard. Water means 2 weather stories meeting. You pick the more patient one as your handrail and let the fussy chop chatter itself out. Light joke 1, welcome to COS update notes say, improved hip-based navigation. Do not sit down. Swell bends around land you can't see yet. When islands or reefs split and refract, waves lanes of smoother water form like corridors between faintly shouldered guards. Paddle or wade those soft lanes, and you're letting physics sketch a map for you, 2 gentle V's pointing toward a gap. Foam punctuation returns here too. Tide rips stitch white commas on boundaries where currents meet. The clearest commas mark channels you can ride. You don't charge, you thread commas until the water speaks fluent ease. Birds make aerial roads. Far offshore at dawn land, birds leave their roosts like arrows toward feeding grounds. Near dusk, those arrows flip and point home. Follow morning lines to good edges and evening lines to trees that smell like guano and sunlight. Please admire from upwind, unless you to fish market is your preferred cologne. Gulls cruise river plumes miles out. Their insistence tells you where fresh water fingers the sea. Mainstream fact for your sea kit, Inuit and other Arctic travelers read water sky, a dark reflection under clouds over open water, and ice blink a bright glow over pack ice, while Pacific wayfinders track landfall birds, terns, noddies, whose dawn and dusk commutes reveal island directions long before the horizon does. Different latitudes, same kindness from the world. Clouds give you island rumors. A lonely cumulus tower that stays parked in otherwise clean sky usually grows over warm land, or a reef warming the air, an orographic hat. Long rows of cloud streets line up with wind. You stand underneath one, and it's as if a careful finger has drawn your lane. Low, brownish smudges near the horizon on very clear days that can be dust or pollen lifted from distant shore. Smell it as you get closer, a faint warm earth note under salt. You file these as sky versions of bison rock and tongue spruce dependable characters, with moods you already know how to read. Drift speaks if you touch it. Palm fronds with fresh green wetness haven't traveled far. Bleached sticks with shipworm pinholes have wandered. Seaweed with pebbly sand trapped in its curls hints at nearby reefs. Kelp stipes heavy with small snails smell like rock coasts, not sandy bays. You borrow your sommelier of soil trick and let a fingertip taste a drop. A surprising slackening of brine can mean a river plume ahead. Good news for drink, a caution for crossing, if the outflow is throwing a muscled shoulder. Light joke too, congratulations your palate. Now includes notes of upstream. Horizon trickery helps and misleads. On cold layered air, you get looming where distant land bulks higher than it is. On certain days, a Fata Morgana stacks cliffs into castles and stretches islands like taffy. Useful as a lighthouse, treacherous as gossip. So you pair mirage wit with honest cues. Swell-bending birds commuting cloud hats. In polar light, ice throws back its own sky. Bright blink for ice, dark water, sky for leads. Those reflections are the ocean's version of the sun's shadow ladders in the forest. Once you've seen the pattern, you can't unsee it. On ice, you trade foam for grain. Sastrugi wind-cut snow ridges etch the surface with the history of prevailing winds. You ride along their spines when you want speed, or cut across at the shallowest angle when you want calm. Thin Nilus shines dark and elastic, whispering not today. Young grey-white ice mutters a cautious maybe. Old blue slabs glower like reasonable elders. A staff becomes your twig tracker. The sound tells thickness. Glassy ping thin bell, thunk trust, soggy clap trap. Pressure ridges pile like frozen surf. Leads long dark rivers of open water snake between flows. You treat leads as highways in fair weather and as moats in foul. And you keep a rendezvous rule as strict as any forest drill. If the world cracks and fogs, we circle to the lee of the last ridge and burn a low, patient flame behind a snow wall. Not in the open where wind can write our story without consent. Smell and sound still map the featureless. Surf's low thunder crawls astonishing distances at night. Waterfall rumble rides flat water like a wire. The sharp ammoniac sting of a rookery tells you which way to stop enjoying deep breaths. In the high north, a seal's breathing hole smells faintly warm and animal. In mid-latitudes, the sweet rot of a tide rack line means you're nearing a shoulder where land catches sea gifts. Bioluminescent plankton blue-green sea sparkle draws your wake at night. Stir an oar and watch eddies write themselves in light-revealing cross-currents like glowing ink. Quirky tidbit on very still, cold nights. Thin sea ice sometimes sings a glass harp choir of pings and slides as plates flex. It's not a compass, but it is the nicest warning you'll ever hear. You keep the old redundancies because oceans and ice adore pranks. Swell on the right shoulder, sky belt on the left. One wind on the same cheek for more than 100 heartbeats, 3 green lights. If one blinks yellow, you stop adding speed and add attention. Historians still argue whether early ocean crossings across the Pacific were the fruit of intentional repeatable exploration, or whether some islands were first peopled by downwind drift and then integrated into deliberate networks. Your practice doesn't wait for the vote, you move, as if each choice must be repeatable tomorrow by a younger version of you with less sleep and fewer stories. Handrails versus rendezvous rules and quiet hedges against surprises. Back-bearing matters when there's no bison rock to glance at. You aim off with swell the way you do with rivers hold a slight bias toward the lee of where you think your island lies, so that when you fetch up on its shoulder, you know to turn one way, not wonder which. You practice the turn-home verse in reverse before you need it. You keep a cloud hat on your chosen cheek through a dozen verses. You count birds, 10, then 20, until the air thickens with wings, proof you're intersecting a commute and not romanticizing a lonely gull. If the day lurches weird stormline visibility gone, you shift to the boring plan that gets you a dry camp on old ice, or an easy lee, even if it adds a verse. Light joke 3. The deluxe features of Boring Plan Plus include still being alive to complain about how boring it was. Mainstream history taps your paddle with another postcard. Norse sailors in Saga tell of releasing ravens if the bird bolted and didn't return land lay that way. If it circled back, better keep searching. Whether that trick was routine or rare is a scholar's wrestling match, but the principle rhymes with your Goose Express, and evening turns borrow beaks that know the lanes. Meanwhile, your earlier friends, the Marshallese, built stick charts that abstracted these very swell-bend corridors and atoll shadows. You've already stolen the idea into your bones, counting lift and lull like beads. On the ice flats, the sky becomes your map in negative. Low cloud with white underbellies, ice beyond. Low cloud with dark undersides, water ahead. A line of loud silence in bird country. No cries where there should be thousands can mean a new break in the flow between you and the rookeries. You never trust silence alone. You tap sniff and listen for that bell thunk below your staff because the hollow that eats. Footsteps has a cousin out here, the plate that dunked heroes, and your feet prefer humility to legend. You teach sea and ice the way you taught forest games first. Find the cloud hat with your eyes closed. Point when your cheek feels its shade. Tell which swell owns the lane with your hips. Name the sound pancake, ice clink, or open water slap. Songs help rock 2 notch, 2 splash becomes lift, 2 slide, 2 birds hold. And once you can hum it backward, you're halfway home. Evening finds you sliding into a lee you chose 3 verses ago because birds thickened and the swell softened and the cloud hat turned from rumor to porch roof. You haul up beyond the bite of spray or tuck behind a tidy ridge of pressure ice and build a low flame that says rest instead of story. The sea keeps breathing in the dark. The ice keeps its glass choir faintly busy. You smooth a sandy apron in your mind, if not under your palm, and mark a small, respectful arrow of stones above the tide line for tomorrow you. Open water and white flats were never blank. They were paragraphs written in slow rhythm. You only had to read with your knees, your cheeks, and your old steady habit of checking twice. Sometimes you do get lost. The world slips its skin, the path unthreads, and a small, bright panic taps your ribs like a woodpecker. You have a rule for that stop before the sprint. Sit where the ground is kind, make your breath a metronome again, 4 in 4 out, and run a quick inventory. Wind bias on one cheek slope, tug in your ankles, a far sound, you can triangulate Owl Creek surf. You name the last place you were certain, the twig gate above Sedge Elbow, and treat everything after that as rumor. Rumors don't get to drive. You stage a comeback the same way you explored New Valley's loops and handrails. Pick one honest feature a ridge, hum a creek's cool breath, and make a small box with your legs out. 20 slow breaths right, 10 back, 20 left, 10 always returning to your home corner, which you tag with a whisper can and a note in your song. If the box learns nothing, you build the next just beside it. Small boxes keep fear from buying a megaphone. Light joke 1, congratulations, you've unlocked Boring Plan Plus. Deluxe features include getting home to complain about how boring it was. Signals help searchers find you. You carry a few you can build from nothing. In daylight, you feed your fire with damp leaves or green needles, just enough to thicken smoke into a pale flag. At night, you bank coals and add resin so the glow is steady and visible in a polite radius. You use the camp code you've used for years. 2 taps. Pause 1 tap because strangers might not know what you mean, but your people will. You hum the resin verse from Tongue Spruce so your own heartbeat doesn't start freelancing into jitters. You keep water, a small problem. Melt, dip, sip, and let hunger be loud only at meals. You know the difference between urgency and drama. Drama gets no rations. People are your best map when the world blurs. The crew you taught in Section 12 runs the script you drilled into them for rain and fog. One team rides the berry contour eyes soft for crushed sedge and twig gates. Another team shadows the creek by sound alone, letting foam punctuation show the main seam. A third holds to the terrace that carried you all spring. Everyone counts breaths to measure distance. Everyone hums the turns so they can tell each other 2 verses past Breadloaf Rock without arguing numbers. Small search grids, big patience. No sprinting into the hollow that eats footsteps. Just because nerves want an accomplishment. Mainstream fact for your comfort. Kalahari. Ju Hoansi and other San master trackers have long read human spoor with a precision that modern search and rescue units now document and use pace length, toe pressure, scuff angle, reconstructing a person's choices step by step and marking last known sign with stones. The same skill that once fueled persistence hunts now finds lost herders and wandering children. Translation: your species knows how to recover its own. You leave breadcrumbs that rain can't bully. A 3-stone home arrow angled to read only from one direction. A knee-high blaze on the down trail side of a doubtful split. A grass tickle compass looped around a finger so you can feel, even in fog, whether your wind bias has flipped. You drop tiny caches as you ought to have done, anyway. A dry ember bundle under a rock lip. 2 fire drills tucked into a snag's armpit near the terrace. A loop of cord at the ford. Searchers will see them and know they're on your wake. You will see them and feel your ribs loosen. Quirky tidbit for morale: a wafer of tinder fungus will babysit a coal for hours while you walk. It's the slow cooker of fire. Some wanderers swear by floating a leaf in a puddle to show a sneaky breath of wind when the air seems dead. The tiny drift becomes an arrow you can hold on one cheek. It's not glamorous, but glamorous is for murals. You're running a rescue of one you. Myths keep children from wandering and keep adults from pretending the land has no teeth. Talking Cliff with its echo ghosts is not haunted. It's a sound trap that steals your bearings. The meadow with too much sky is not ruled by angry gods. It's a lightning theater and an anvil for hail. The story keeps the right weight scary enough to stick, accurate enough to save. You repeat the warnings without turning them into sermons. Historians still argue whether many bogey tales began as navigational notes in costume or as spiritual maps later repurposed for safety. You keep using the parts that work stories that tug feet toward good choices and away from reed mazes. Night can turn lost into legend if you let it. So you don't let it. If the hinge star shows you, set it a palm to one shoulder and keep it there. If cloud smothers the hinge, you hold the glow of the hidden moon on one cheek and ride your Owl Creek surf triangle like a patient boat. If every sky cue dies, you find stone that kept afternoon heat. Warm face and line 3 in a row to rebuild your sense of time's slope. Warmth. Less warmth, cool an arrow backward today. You hum rock 2 notch 2 splash hold, not because those features are present, but because the rhythm keeps your steps slow enough for your vestibular gyroscopes to stitch a reliable thread. You also practice the least cinematic, but most effective move staying put. Sit where the ground is kind, and your smoke can run up a corridor lee of a boulder edge of a terrace, not the hungry reed beds that will drink your heat. You stack small comforts into big courage, warm stone under your thighs, dry socks if you have them. The diploma of sensible people, a joke about sommelier of soil opening a vintage of puddle. Light joke 2 5 stars pairs well with not walking in circles. Social glue does the rest. Your people don't just go, look, they follow lanes. Other species drew elk, premium switchbacks, goose express, sky ribbons, and they leave quiet notes for each other the way you taught them. They aim off toward the left shoulder of Bite Notch because you always aim off. Then they turn right by rule not guess and shake mint at Bread Loaf Rock so the bees laugh and the air smells like home. One small voice calls your knock pattern. Another stacks the twig gates. A third youngest and proudest finds your knee-high blaze and sings the resin verse like a lantern. You lean into the open questions because that keeps your mind awake without being frantic. Are we born with a true inner compass, some magnet in our meat, or do we only get good at dead reckoning by rehearsal? Historians still argue. Your ankles and cheeks answer pragmatically. You drift without landmarks. You sharpen with practice, and your best bet is redundancy. The trio, the quartet, the choir. Light joke 3. If a tiny magnet lives in you, it's mostly there to stick helpful notes to your ribcage. When they find you, and they do, because you stayed sit calm instead of sprint brave, you stand slow. Thank the world with a hand on the nearest rock, and walk home on the rope you all wove together across seasons. Foam punctuation along the main seam, the berry contour's shade. The Hawk's noon elevator at Bite Notch, the lemon breath of tongue spruce, the late warmth of bison rock, the sandy apron smoothed by someone who believed in tomorrow. Lost turns out to be weather again. Brief and local inside a climate of belonging that rarely fails. Now the night softens around you like a shawl, and the hard edges of the day round off until they are only smooth stones in a pocket. The fire hushes to a low, steady breath. The resin in tongue spruce fades from bright citrus to something gentle and warm. Far off the creek keeps its patient syllables riffle-run pool. Each sound less like a command and more like a lullaby you've been hearing since before you knew what songs were. Bison Rock holds the last memory of sunlight and gives it back by degrees the way good friends do. The Sky River, broad and pale, leans toward the bite in the horizon, and you don't need to name it. You only let its slow drift carry your thoughts, the way long swells carry small boats up, pause, down, and up again. Your shoulders release their quiet grip. Your breath lengthens almost by itself. 4 in 4 out like the world is breathing with you, and not the other way around. If your mind still wants to roam, give it a small, kind task walk. The berry contour in imagination, feeling the soft, springy duff underfoot. Touch the mint at Breadloaf Rock without picking. Listen for the single owl in Talking Cliff, and let the echo return like a thin ribbon. You are in no hurry to catch. Nothing to fix. Nothing to prove. The map is kept. The sandy apron is smoothed for tomorrow. The 3-stone arrow points nowhere you need to rush. Let the wind become only a cool hand on one cheek, the way it always is when the world means you well. Let the fire's ember be a single quiet star that happened to fall to earth and decided kindly to stay. Sleep is a path you already know. You've walked it 1,000 evenings from glow to shadow to rest. Tonight you walk it again, easy, unlost, and home.